Board meeting for Monday, August 3rd for the town of Essex to order. And a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. We're doing this online, so if you wish to speak today, please remember that you need to raise your hand using your toolbar or by indicating your wish to speak in the chat. If you are not speaking, please do not have your microphone on. Please mute your mic unless you're speaking. And when you do speak, please state your full name. I believe we don't have a minutes recorder today, and so the person who's going to be taking care of the minutes is going to use the recording. So it's very important that you state your name clearly when you decide to speak today. Okay. Are there any agenda additions or changes?
Excuse me, speaking of recording, did we start recording?
Good catch. I don't know that we see the recording started. Evan or Greg?
Let me get the recording started.
Thank you.
How about asking again?
I see the recording has started. Thank you very much. We can definitely begin now.
The question was, are there any changes or additions? And the answer is no.
Okay. Do any of the board members wish to take any items off the consent agenda to make part of the business meeting? All right, hearing none, it appears that our agenda will stand, so we don't need to approve it. Now we will have business item 4, public to be heard. This is for the public to speak to the select board on items that are not currently on the agenda. If you have something you'd like to talk to us about that is not a business item for the evening, now would be the time. You can do so by raising your hand or by indicating that you wish to speak in the chat. And please remember to state your name clearly when you begin speaking. I see a hand from Ken Signorello. Go ahead, Ken.
Hello, folks. How are you all this evening? I have a quick question. I don't need an answer right now. You may not have it, but maybe I can get something a little later. So at the last joint meeting, Trustee Tyler mentioned something which kind of puzzled me a little bit. I actually asked him about it, if you remember. He said that the town collects collectively from the entire town some $700,000 for road work and related things, and none of that money is spent in the village, was I think his claim. And I actually asked him about it, and he clarified it wasn't your normal repairs he was referring to. He was thinking capital expenditures. I didn't have time to go through the annual report or anything like that, so I don't really know. Is the question basically is it true? Does the town collect $700,000 or allocate $700,000 for capital expenditures on roads and such, and those projects that are tend to get spent on are only outside the village? That's the question.
And the answer is yes, that is true. I don't know if $700,000 is the exact amount. I don't have my annual report handy, but yes, capital funds are charged at a rate of 2 cents on every household, and the town spends that money on projects that happen outside of the village.
And there's no allocation for projects in the village at all?
No, there is not.
Doesn't seem quite fair.
No, it doesn't, does it?
No, it doesn't. Doesn't the village at least lobby for help with some of their projects?
Yes, actually, the village lobbies very hard for that, and that's what merger's all about, because that is the basis for, part of the basis for tax equity. My apologies for laughing at that question. That was rude. The village does lobby for that heavily every chance they get, and it is the basis for the consolidation efforts that we've been doing, and it is the basis for why we're attempting to merge, so that we can even out that tax inequity.
Okay. My impression was that this is like an ongoing sort of thing, and the select board, you are the select board, you decide how to allocate that money. Why haven't we been allocating more for village projects, I guess?
That's an excellent question, Ken, and it's one we've tried to answer for years. And so our new budget is coming up soon, and perhaps we'll discuss it in more depth. But it's a difficult question because when you spread that tax burden around, taxes in the town outside the village would go up.
And I suppose there's the complication is how does the town participate with money or with trucks and people? It can get complicated, I assume.
It could get complicated, but if we merged, it would be pretty easy because we'd have one list of prioritized projects and we'd all be paying the same. Let's move on if that's okay with you, Ken.
Thank you for your answer. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that has questions for the board that are not on the agenda?
Yeah, I have a question. I can't figure out how to raise my hand on the chart there.
That's okay. If you can't raise your hand, you can also ask to chat, or you can do what you just did, Ethan. Okay. Go right ahead.
Appreciate it. I was curious to follow up on at the town meeting. I spoke with people from the waste, not the wastewater, but the water runoff district or whatever. They had allocated a bunch of money that the town of Essex received from the state. And I was wondering when those projects are going to be completed, if they are going to be completed this year. For me personally, the repair of Osgood Hill Road in Essex. And many other roads. I know a lot of places have seen work. I didn't know if the little bit of culvert replacement they did was what they were doing, or if that money was spent elsewhere.
Okay, Ethan. Andy, are you raising your hand to answer that question?
No, I'm trying to respond to something that the conversation that you and Ken had, but
my apologies, I didn't see your hand raised.
Since you've started another conversation, please continue that one. And
I can wait a minute if you want to go back to that real quick.
Now, Ethan, let's take care of your question. Evan, do you have any information?
No, I don't have anything specific. We certainly can get a hold of Mr. Lawrence. Afterwards, I'll have to talk to Denny and others as to this. If I could get an email address, that would be great.
Yeah, do you want me to do that to you now or send you an email?
Send me an email.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ethan. Andy, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
That's okay. I think it's a little simplistic to say that all of the 2 cents of capital that's collected is only spent outside the village. We certainly have joint stormwater projects that capital gets spent on. We also have town offices that are in the village that provide a lot of services to village residents. So I think saying that the entirety of the 2 cent capital tax is spent outside of the village is incorrect, and I think we need to, if that question needs to be answered, it should be given more detailed response than.
Yes, definitely a more thorough response, which I believe will be coming forward based on the request from residents that we'll be talking about in our first business item. But the lion's share of that funding definitely is not spent in the village. Any other questions or comments from residents that are not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our first business item, 5A. Consider request for financial implications of separation of Town of Essex and Village of Essex Junction. We received an email, board members, I'm sure you saw, along with the village trustees requesting information of this kind, and the trustees went ahead and asked staff to begin to compile that information and honor that request. So I don't know that there's anything we need to take care of with this business item unless any of you have questions or comments. Pat?
Just a quick comment that I do think and support the staff spending their time on this. I feel like it's a big missing piece of the financial puzzle that we've needed for a while to kind of look at everything all together. So I don't want the impression to be that only the village trustees themselves think that this is a valuable piece of information to have. I'm very much looking forward to the end results of what our staff comes up with.
Thanks, Pat. Anyone else? Okay.
Oh, sorry, I just want to echo that I do also think it's important, like as Pat said, just expressing my support in this effort.
Great.
But appreciating that this is a big lift for staff,
Yeah.
and it's very appreciated from the board, or at least for me.
Okay. Dawn or Andy? Okay. All right, moving on to business item 5B, discussion and potential action on possibility of moving to Australian ballot budget voting. We had a memo in our packet on this. So I'm wondering, Evan or Greg, if there are any updates or changes to what you've provided to us on this topic so far?
Nothing different from what's in the memo. We talked to the town attorney a little bit. Here's my camera. Talked to the town attorney a little bit about what it would take to get it on the ballot for November. He advised it's actually not a charter change. It's just a vote that would go on the ballot. And if the vote is affirmative to move to Australian ballot for budget, it would be that way going forward until there was a vote to go about it a different way.
Okay, thanks, Greg.
Oh.
Dawn had her hand up and then Vince. You're muted, Dawn.
Sorry about that. Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to place the following on the November ballot. Shall the town of Essex adopt its annual budget by Australian ballot?
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Let's get a second and then we can open it for discussion.
Madam Chair, can I have her restate that just a hair slower?
It's shall the town of Essex adopt its annual budget by Australian ballot to be placed on the November ballot.
Now, go ahead with this. Does anyone want to second that?
So do we second first and then discuss, or can we make an amendment?
Yeah, we second and then it's open for discussion,
Okay.
and then we can do whatever.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, Dawn moved and Vince seconded. So now it's open for discussion. And what would you like to say, Vince?
My question is, Australian ballot is basically mail-in ballots. Is there a distinction there?
No, Australian ballot is the polls. If we decide we wanted to go to mail-in ballot, that's not something we can easily do. That's something the Secretary of State has to allow us to do. Is that correct, Dawn?
That's correct.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I'm sorry. I had that confused.
Just for clarification, this year, based on this is Evan, based on the pandemic, the state allowed mail-in ballot for elections. That is just because of the pandemic.
Right.
In the future, it would be more like every other election in the past.
Can I add to why I decided this?
Yes,
Well,
I'd like to hear that.
Well, my proposal was if it goes onto the ballot and it passes, we could keep town meeting to the original Monday. We could do our budget presentation. At that time, make any adjustments that may come to the floor. We would then hold a brief meeting after to confirm the adjusted budget, if it's adjusted, or the original budget. And then we have enough time to warn the vote to coincide with the school vote. That way we only have one time that everybody has to go to the polls if the polls are open, or one time that everybody would have to mail their ballots in. It would save money in the long run.
Can I restate that, Dawn, to make sure I have that right? So you're suggesting that we hold town meeting in March and we do the budget presentation at that meeting and then allow it to be amended?
If there are any. There's not always, Elaine, but sometimes,
Right.
You know how that goes. They add
Yeah,
or subtract or whatever.
And then what you're saying is the select board would approve an amended budget and then warn it for April when there's, so you're saying warn it for the village meeting and the school board budget.
Correct. There are enough days. I checked today and counted them, and there's usually enough days for the warning. I checked with the Secretary of State to make sure of the timeline, and it works great. So.
Okay. Andy, I see your hand.
Yeah, this has been discussed before. It's been called hybrid voting. This isn't, and I thought we had legal counsel comment that this leads to some questions about double voting on some things, where those that come to town meeting get to vote on the budget twice, and that there's some legal questions about that. So I'm not sure. I think we have to have more discussion if what we're really talking about here is hybrid voting, not just Australian vote or ballot voting. I also wanted to comment for those that weren't here before the meeting. I'm not turning my camera on because I had eye surgery today, and I don't want to show it to everybody, just to let everybody know.
So Andy, I remember the same thing you're stating. I think Dan Richardson informed us when we suggested the hybrid voting, which was something that the Essex Governance Group had recommended in their report that we accepted quite some time ago. And he had said that that's tantamount to voting on the budget twice. So while I guess what I'm saying is maybe we should be confirming that, but that doesn't preclude putting Australian ballot on the November ballot.
Yeah, I'm not asking him to vote on the budget that night, just to hear your proposal and to make suggestions, like we make, not to actually vote until the vote takes place.
So non-binding suggestions from the floor is what you're saying.
Right.
Okay.
Madam Chair, we have our town attorney on, and he's got his hand raised.
Okay, and I'm seeing members of the public starting to raise their hands. We'll have public voting, or excuse me, public input before we vote. Bill, please enlighten us.
My understanding of the Australian ballot question, when I said you didn't require a charter change, was that we would vote on Tuesday in March on the budget in the polls. Instead of a floor vote, it would be Australian ballot. What Don is proposing would require a charter change. Just wanted to make that clear.
Okay, because you're really changing the method, because town meeting is not just the evening meeting, but it's the day's polling as well. That's all considered town meeting.
Correct. And so you wouldn't need to change the language now if you had a vote at the polls on Tuesday instead of a floor vote on Monday night. It's still town meeting. But if you move to a different date in April, you're going to need a charter change.
Okay.
Okay.
Dawn.
Now withdraw my proposal, but I'm leaving my motion.
Oh, okay. Leave the motion for the ballot, but withdraw the April proposal. So then if that's the case, you would be having the vote at the polls on the Tuesday after town meeting in the evening. Got it. I see Evan's hand up. I see, okay, Evan and Bill. I'm not sure if those are legacy hands or not.
Mine was.
Okay. So, board members, Ethan, I see you raising your hand. A few more minutes. Pat, go ahead.
So certainly I support Australian ballot as a budget vote and for a mechanism that we should look into going forward. I do admit though that I'm a little curious about taking action at this meeting. I thought, and certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that at our last meeting that we had agreed to give the trustees time to have their one meeting to discuss the totality of the proposal with Andrew Brown as our negotiating partners. So I'm not comfortable proceeding with a vote tonight. I certainly want to have the discussion, but and make preparations for us to vote and take action next meeting. But I really am a little surprised that we would move to take action when we just last meeting said that we would give them the time to talk about it, as a group.
We did say that we would wait until the trustees had their conversation and were able to come back to us about that. So there is that. Hold on just a second, Vince. Dawn, is your hand up again or no? Okay, go ahead, Vince.
Is this something we can move as a discussion point to the joint meeting?
It's not a warrant topic for the joint meeting.
Okay.
So,
Gotcha.
you-
I would say as well, though, that also doesn't help the trustees because they have not met since last Tuesday.
Right.
So, they could come together, obviously, but they have not had any time as a group to discuss the proposal and which actions they would want to take. I just feel like we owe it to them as they had requested that they were a meeting behind we were. So they had not had a chance to respond or react to the select board's discussion about taking Australian ballot out of the merger plan and proceeding with it independently.
So we still have one more meeting before a deadline to put anything on the November ballot. We need to be acting on anything that wants to go on the ballot by August 21st. And I believe our next meeting is August 18th, perhaps. Is that correct, Greg or Evan? So we have time. My suggestion is we open it up to the public for comment unless the board members have any additional comments, and then we bring it back to the board. I'd like to recommend that we hold off till that August 18th meeting, but let's listen to the public. All right? Okay. Same as usual, if you have something you want to say, either raise your hand or let us know in the chat. I saw Ethan and then Betsy and then Ken and then Brad. Ethan, Betsy, Ken, Brad. Go ahead, Ethan.
All right, thank you, Ethan Lawrence. Yeah, so I think I see both sides of the conversation, but I think wholeheartedly, 100%, that needs to be a change, because we don't even know if we have a vote on the merger yet, and I believe that this is the next step that we need to take as a town. I mean, we were all there. There was 271 people that approved a budget for 20,000 people. I came from Milton, so we had a town meeting, day, and then you voted the next day. They proposed a budget. They listened to the public's concerns. They adjusted accordingly to what they thought that would be approved as appropriate. It was either passed or it was denied. When it was denied, it was brought back to the table and it was voted on again to be approved. But I don't believe, and I was pretty disappointed when I found out, and that's why I went to the town meeting and stated all my concerns, that 271 people decide the fate of $14 million when there's 20,000 of us that are being represented by that money. And, I'd like to touch back on the capital gains thing too, because that money, that as I was interpreted it by, the money that we received from the state for the storm in October was as Essex as a whole, and that money was split throughout the town and the village. And that, as my understanding from what I heard, I could be incorrect, please correct me if I'm wrong, but that money was allocated for both the town and the village, town outside the village, I should say, as a whole, when it was dispersed. But other than that, I just strongly believe in, equal representation, and the fact that 271 of us should not be deciding on where we spend our money. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Betsy.
Hi, yes, thank you, Elaine. So when I agree that Australian ballot is needed, and I had talked to Jim Condos, and he had said as long as we're not voting at town meeting, and it's just we're suggesting amendments to you, but if you accept those amendments and it changes that night what the budget is, you can't have the meeting, you can't vote the next day because it's not warned to the public that weren't at the town meeting. You need those days to warn that. And that's why what Dawn was suggesting, having it in the April, gives that warning from when it was amended at the town meeting. That's why the town hybrid works. And that's the same language we already have in the merger language. And while I appreciate what Pat's saying, and I understand you want to, include the trustees, but the trustees are not in charge of the town. And this is a town question. It's nice they have a vote and they can have their same period of time to have a question, but this is the select board's decision, no one else's, to make this change. And this is what the people of Essex really want. And they really do. And my question also is that Greg was supposed to talk with Bill about the language for the 3 and 3, for the representation, for equal representation. And my thoughts are that
we're covering 3-3 next, so we need to keep it separate.
Okay, I'll keep it separate from that. Thank you. And
Thank
so
you.
that's what I think about the Australian ballot. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Ken, then Brad. I thought I saw Deb McAdoo had her hand up. But go ahead, Ken, and then Brad.
Just a technical thing, so it's a bit of a point of order. I've been over the meeting that we just had. There were two motions, one regarding the charter changes and one regarding the vote on the merger in November. One was tabled, one was postponed. The subtle difference. Tabling typically means that you need to take it off the table and discuss it at the very next meeting. It should be available. The postponement specifies when it could be brought up again. Dawn was very specific. It was for the merger vote in November after the next trustee meeting. And it's not on the agenda, and it's not on the joint agenda. That's appropriate because it won't be on the agenda until after the next trustee meeting. But from Pat's concern, no, this was not postponed or tabled. It was just tabled. It was not postponed till after the next trustee meeting. Only the merger vote was. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Ken. Brad, please don't forget to state your full name so we can get it in the minutes.
There we go. I'm on there. I'm Brad Kennison. I do agree with Ethan and Betsy both in that the Australian ballot in April would allow the greatest number of voters to participate. Only 271 at town meeting is to vote on the budget is pretty minimal. So I realize that requires a charter change to do so, but we should be looking at, or you should be looking at, what method would allow the greatest number of voters to participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Is there anyone else who hasn't already spoken that wishes to speak? Looks like we got everybody.
No, can I jump in real quick?
There's
This is
Deb.
McAdoo. And I just really wanted to say, first of all, to the gentlewoman who made this motion, I'd like to remind her that not everyone in Essex Town has only one vote. Some of us have to vote twice to go with our 2 tax bills. So I'd like to remind you of that if you go to Australian ballot for one, then I would appreciate that if we give the village time. Maybe we could even get this together so that we could do all votes on one day and save a boatload of money. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, so let's bring it back to the board. Pat, you had your hand up.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly think that we're all on the same page here. I think most of us agree that Australian ballot is a necessity for a town as large as ours is, and we can certainly discuss the mechanics of it. I do want to touch on the trustees' involvement in this, which is that I'm certainly aware that as a select person, that we cover the entirety of the town itself, and it is absolutely within our purview to move forward with this. However, there is quite a bit to be said about being good negotiating partners and working together with the individuals that we do have to continue to work with, since we know that we're delaying the merger vote. Including this was part of a proposal that we worked on for an extensive period of time. So pulling it out unilaterally is, to be frank, simply unfair and is bad business. It is not that I don't want to be non-responsive. In fact, again, I'm 100% in agreement with Australian ballot voting. It's just that when we talk about giving the trustees a week to have a meeting so that they can discuss this, it's simply a matter of respect, nothing more than that.
Thank you, Pat. So board members, do you have any other comments or questions? Andy?
Yeah, I think to address the question of whether we take comment on the budget at town meeting and then potentially act on it, and then later warn potentially a different budget. We already have budget hearings where anyone can come and make those suggestions, which would happen before we've warned the town meeting budget. And so I think changing the charter to allow us to vote on it in April rather than in March is a much bigger undertaking than simply telling people to come to the budget hearings with their inputs. Since there's not going to be any binding vote at town meeting during the town meeting to make any changes, I guess I would encourage folks to come to the earlier meetings. Usually nobody shows up for the budget hearings. So.
Well, Pat?
Yeah, Andy, I think brought up a great point, and I would agree with that. It's what the school does now for a significantly larger budget. There are extensive sessions to talk about and give input on the budget previous to this. So this seems like, the simplest way would be, as Bill has mentioned, not requiring a charter change.
So based on your comments, I would like to know if the board's consensus is that we are willing to wait until our next meeting to formally vote on this motion.
I would feel most comfortable with that.
I would also feel comfortable with that.
Andy and Dawn. And Dawn, I realize this is your motion.
Thanks.
I didn't hear.
Is there a motion on the floor?
Dawn,
you're muted.
You're muted, and you froze up a little bit, so I need you to start over there.
Yeah, it's put back.
Okay.
Are you asking me to withdraw my motion until the next meeting, basically?
Yes, if that's okay.
Because there's a motion on the floor and I can't change it unless I withdraw it. So
that's right.
Okay, I will.
So I didn't get a chance to make any comment.
Go ahead, Andy. I'll wait.
I thought Don was making comments. I guess my comment is that I guess I'll accept waiting till yet another meeting, as long as staff is comfortable that we know what the language needs to be and we don't have to have an emergency meeting in order to meet the deadline. It's not going to change my position, whatever the trustees say. So I don't know. I don't want to lose the opportunity because of thoughts that we need to wait.
I appreciate that, Andy. Evan?
Thank you. I guess then what I would, and I like Andy's approach, if I can get the language that you would prefer, then we hold off. We can be prepared for the day after, the morning after the joint meeting with the village, or when the board gets back the 18th, we will already have the approved language and ready to go.
And I'm assuming that that approved language is what Dawn recommended in her motion?
Dawn retracted some of it, so I'm not sure. I would want to hear what if she's still looking to do an April vote.
Nope.
No, we're
That
not.
wasn't part of the motion.
That's why I need to hear it again.
It's, shall the town of Essex adopt its annual budget by Australian ballot? Short and sweet.
Period. Right.
I agree with that language.
I also agree with that language. For the uninitiated, is there like a blurb we can put on there explaining what Australian ballot is?
I think that can be part of our meeting materials when we do a formal vote on this. Australian ballot is a pretty common. It's going to the polls. It's called Australian ballot. So
Yeah.
I know that our clerk does do some educational outreach, and we can make sure that we're explaining that to everyone, because we're going to have to tell folks we've made a change. You know, you've approved this, assuming that happens, and here's what's going to happen at town meeting from now on. So it's a significant change for our history. We've been around for quite some time, and it would be changing town meeting and the character of town meeting. So it's a very important decision we're making here. Evan?
I heard 3 responses. I've heard Dawn. Madam Chair, do you have a preference on this?
That language is fine with me.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know you wanted unanimity. That language sounds great to me too.
I just wanted a general sense. Thank you. No need to continue.
Okay. Dawn, thank you for being willing to wait one more meeting. I realize that's frustrating. And I do want to, in the spirit of good faith negotiations, be good partners with the trustees. And while I know that they don't have jurisdiction over the entire town, they are our partners. And we did give them the time to have a meeting on this, and we need to honor that.
So, Elaine, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm not sure how to do this because there is a motion and a second on the floor. So
yes, so Vince needs to also withdraw his second.
I withdraw my second.
Okay. So
I'll
therefore,
withdraw the original motion until the next meeting.
Thank you very much. Okay. Unless there's additional discussion, we could move on to number 5C. Discussion and potential action on charter change language in support of 3-3 select board composition. So going into this discussion, we know our deadline is our next meeting. We need to finish this up if it's to go on the November ballot. Greg or Evan, do you want to review the memo?
Sure, I can take the first stab at it, and Evan, jump in when you want to.
First,
so
Greg,
basically,
Greg, hang on one second. First, I want to make a note of a typo. Anywhere we have interchanged 3+3, sometimes with 3-3. It's supposed to be 3+3. Okay, thanks, Greg. Jump in.
Sure. So I'm just trying to pull it up. So last week the board wanted to get some more information of what it would look like to support the 3+3 charter change that was passed in March. We went back, Evan and I, we took a look at the letter from the chair and the vice chair of the Vermont House Government Operations Committee, which was sent to Evan in May, and it outlined some issues that they had with the proposal. 3 primary ones, and we tried to use that as kind of our roadmap to go forward and present the board with some options as to how to potentially support this. That's where the memo comes into play with some options and hopefully get some direction from the board. The House Government Ops Committee had a few issues. The first one was that there was no transitional provision for electing a new select board, of how to move in from the current select board to the 3+3 model. And I'll run through some of the details in a moment. The second issue was including reapportionment language. Right now, the town, village, and village district, for lack of a better terms at this point, are pretty much equal in population. That may or may not always be the case. And when there's districts or wards that are established, there needs to be roughly equal population, within 10% of the ideal, if you split them in half, essentially. So there's some options there to include some of that language. And the third issue was the even number of members. The letter from the chair and the vice chair of government ops talked about how the odd number of members is a standard practice of what they recommend in the legislature to help break tie votes. So understanding that 3 and 3 was meant to have an even number of members, took a look at some options for dealing with a tie. So going back to the first option, starting elections the first year after approval by the legislature, and Andy remembered an option that was not included here, which I can speak to, and Andy jump in. But basically, we had some guidance from I believe it was the attorney giving us advice on merger, Dan Richardson, who said that you can transition in at any time, and even though you'd have some members who were elected by the entire community and representing the entire community, you could also have some members who were elected by wards. The wards sitting at the same time as the board, they'd also be representing the entire community. So that's not in the memo, but it's an option. You could do that starting elections the first year after the legislature approves the charter changes. You have to wait until that happens because the legislature has the final say on making the charter changes valid or adopted legal law. And I just lost my screen. There it is. Another option is to postpone it, hold the first 3 and 3 elections after the legislature adopts it, wait 3 years, and you can kind of create a staggered transition phase so that everybody on the select board their term ends at the same time, and you have new elections for town and village districts. And the last one is all board members could resign effective the year the charter change takes effect, and you could hold new elections that would require, I guess, partnerships or agreements from all the sitting board members, and there's a possibility of elections happening before this is approved. None of these are necessarily ideal options, but it's possible. And I think with what Andy brought up, we can get confirmation on that option to have the ward elected members and the at-large elected members sitting at the same time may be the best approach. I don't know if the board wants to talk about these issues one by one, or if you want me to run through all of them at once first.
Well, we need to resolve these issues and then direct staff to craft what we're looking for. I'm assuming that's what our next steps are. Is that correct, Greg?
Excuse me. Yes, that'll be what we're looking for. Spoke with Bill Ellis, the town attorney, a bit last week to try to get the initial impression on some of these things. Hopefully with some direction from the board, we can home in on some of the options and actually present some language that could go onto a ballot on November to see if this is supported.
And I'll add, that is if you still want to move forward with this. The petitioners who did the petition could weigh in as to whether they feel this is necessary.
Correct.
So, board members, do you have any preference? My assumption was that we would be discussing each one of these issues and trying to come to some consensus so that we could direct staff in creating the ballot language. Andy?
Yeah, I think we should move forward on each of these, and I think we're when you say each of these, do you mean looking at the different options for transitioning to 3+3, or are you talking about the different sections of the charter that need to be modified?
No, I'm referring to Greg's memo, issue 1, issue 2, and issue 3.
Yeah, and my question, Andy, was do you want me to run through each issue and then have a broad discussion as a board about all three at once, or do you want to focus on one issue at a time? Ultimately, if this becomes a ballot initiative for November, the advice from legal advice is that it come as a package. So the community voters would be voting on should the following charter changes be adopted, essentially.
I think we should start working one issue at a time, so at least tonight we can resolve at least one thing, right? If we talk about them all together, we're still going to be unresolved on anything because we're already at 7:15, right?
That's right, and we have
Interviews,
interviews coming up shortly. So
yeah.
If we only resolve one issue tonight, then that's not necessarily the case that we will resolve all the issues by the time that the ballot needs to be affirmed. So just letting folks know that that's a possibility. Pat, you've raised your hand.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to go forward and address these as well, I know that the petitioners are in the audience tonight, but we're making a lot of assumptions here about what people may or may not want to have seen because the original draft language in the petition was relatively minimal. It did not include a lot of what GovOps clearly needs. I would caution us if we proceed on this that, if we make decisions on this, they may or may not reflect the will of the people at all. I mean, we just have no way of knowing because we can't survey the 4,000 people who pass this in any meaningful way, shape, or form. We could certainly ask the two petitioners, but they don't represent the entirety of the town. So however we move forward on this, I want us to be really careful that we're not going to be putting language in here that is contrary to what people thought they were voting on back in March.
I don't know that there's any way to avoid that. We need to make decisions on what language to put in the ballot. And if the residents want that to happen, they'll vote yes or no. I mean, like you said, we don't have time to do a survey or any of that kind of stuff. So this is where we need to make some decisions. So I'm more than happy to continue or dive into issue number 1. We'll go in numerical order. If that's okay with all of you, we can have that conversation, and then we will have to wait to finish that conversation because this is a meeting unto itself.
Yep. I agree with that. I was thinking about having a special meeting. I don't know what all your feelings are on that, the rest of the board. But I think this issue is important enough that it probably deserves its own specially warned meeting.
Would that be something board members would be interested in? Andy, how would you feel about that?
I'm having surgery on my other eye next Monday, so that might work. But yeah, and right, there's not enough time. I mean, we're supposed to be starting the next meeting right now, right? And so, yeah, I guess if staff can support it.
Realistically, I don't know that I would have the time to attend another meeting between now and at the very least, next Wednesday would be my earliest, with apologies and begging the indulgence of the rest of the board. I am in a primary race, and the election is August 11th. So I simply don't have the evenings available until after that's over to have an extended discussion about this.
Understood. Well, the fact still remains this is on our agenda. Do we want to start it now and ask staff to schedule a special meeting? It sounds like a special meeting is in the offing regardless of whether we start the discussion now or we save it for later.
I would personally rather wait to talk about all of it
Together.
together, just so that we're not breaking this up then there'll be, 2 different public comments and, yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one.
I see Dawn and Pat nodding their heads. Andy, are you nodding your head too?
I'm shaking my head, but
Okay.
I'd like to make some progress, but
Yeah.
I understand the points that are being made.
Evan? Oh, sorry, Andy, go ahead.
I was just going to say that Greg alluded to my proposal, but didn't really touch on it, and that was in 2023 to have, Vince and my seats will be open, and my proposal was to have one of them voted on as a 1-year term rather than a 3-year term, and that would put everybody put things in the right stagger, and then. So it's other than that, it's not too much different than what one of the alternatives that Greg had already proposed.
Did any board members have a feeling in particular about any of the options presented for issue number 1? Was there anything you would want to strike off the table right away?
I'm not comfortable with all sitting board members resigning effective the first year of the change.
So option C.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with Pat. I think we should have some more like orderly transition away from at-large to award-based representation, just for continuity's sake.
Andy?
Just a couple more comments. One is I don't think that we're going to get this approved in time for a 2021 election. So I think 2021 ends up being a normal at-large is my expectation. And the other is that just to remind folks that Dan Richardson did tell us that even if you're elected from a district, you do represent the entire town. So even though we will have a mixture of at-large and district members, that everyone is expected to represent the entire town. So.
Kind of like we already are.
Yeah.
So what about A or B? Any particular, do any of you have a particular desire to use A or B, or to remove A or B? Narrow it down? Okay.
I prefer not to do B, which is the wait till 2024. I'd prefer to start earlier. I'd like to start, the first year we can, but unfortunately, it depends on when this is approved, right?
Yes.
So I'd like to start in 2022 if we can, and establish, in 2022, 1 village seat and 1 town seat, and then the following year add a village seat, and then have the 1-year term as I suggested, and then after that it becomes a normal rotation of 3 years, 1 per district, or two seats, but 1 per district each year.
What if we did this? Andy, you explained this to us in an email, or to me and Evan and Greg over the weekend. I suggest that we pull that conversation from that email and put it in a public document and have this conversation as part of our special meeting. It sounds like we've narrowed down to option A. Would that be suitable, Andy?
Yes.
Okay. So, Greg, can I ask you to dig out that email that Andy sent to us over the weekend and compare it to option A and have those 2 as the 2 options we'll discuss for issue number 1?
Yes, that I can do that.
Okay.
And Madam Chair?
Yes.
Bill, you're still here, right? Could you unmute for a second?
Hello.
I just want to clarify something. Town Charter Section 202 has terms at 3 years, correct? Do you know that?
I don't have it in front of me, Evan. I'll take your word for it, subject to check.
Okay. And so anything this village, the town does in terms of seats would end up being, if that is true and it's in there, it is for a 3-year term.
Well, you could as part of the transition plan, so long as it's approved by the legislature, you can have staggered terms at the beginning until you get to that point where
But
You
you
know,
would
every-
have, but you would have to have that transition language.
Yes, and it would either be part of the charter or part of some enabling legislation. I've seen it happen both ways.
And when you say enabling legislation, you mean by the board or by the state legislature?
By the state legislature.
Okay. So I just want to say that for the discussions that are occurring, you need to stick with the 3-year term unless the state changes it as part of the charter change that's before them.
Correct.
All right. So if I may suggest, we leave it with issue 1. We wait for staff to come back with the revision to option A of issue 1. And then we pick issue 1 up along with numbers 2 and 3 in a special meeting to be scheduled. Is that the consensus of the board?
Yep, I agree with that.
Vince, I can't see heads nodding at the moment because
Yes.
there's something up on the screen. Okay. Dawn, you're okay with that?
I agree.
Okay. Thank you for your forbearance on this. Before we close out this conversation, there are members of the public that wish to speak. So why don't we, with the board's permission, go ahead and do that. Greg, can I ask you to take the document down so that I can see people's faces? Thank you. Okay, so we have Ken wants to speak and Irene wants to speak.
Hello, thank you. There is a simple solution to this without any language whatsoever. Our charter is pretty clear. It says that all seats have to remain unchanged in terms of their representation, in terms of their term. So if you simply adhere to that one simple rule, the transition is kind of automatic. Where we are, before the charter change is approved. Charter change is approved. New vacant district-based seats. All at-large seats remain unchanged. On March 1st, you have 1 seat expiring. That's an at-large seat. It converts to a district-based seat. And the election takes place. Those are now 3-year seats. The 3-year seats become 2-year seats. And the 2-year seats become 1-year seats. So now you've got 4 at-large, 2 district-based seats. Another year goes by. At that same meeting, there's 1 seat right now, Dawn is in, which will have to be voted on again because that's refilling, but the term stays the same, 1-year seat. At the next election, you have 2 more seats convert. At-large are gone, and everything transitions. Now you have 2 3-year seats district-based, 2 2-year seats district-based, and you're left with 2 at-large, 1 year left each. Next election, converts. Look, you're staggered. 2, 3, and 1 in each of the 2 districts. Works out perfectly. And this would work also if you postpone 1 year. So I've run through a number of transitions. 1 year, 2021 or 2022. It would just be a matter of how many seats are expiring in that particular year. That's the only real difference. So as long as you make the assumption that all at-large seats stay that way until they expire, you're consistent with the charter, which says that very thing. No language necessary. You just have to explain it because apparently the Governance Ops Committee didn't look at our charter to realize that there's already language in there to take care of a transition like this. And finally, after 2023, we'd be all converted. That's it. I think it can work without any extra language, just a matter of explaining that it's already baked into our charter, basically.
Thank you, Ken. Irene, did you still want to speak?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you. When I look at the memo written by the Vice Chair of the Government Operations Committee, I am reminded all over again that it is just something that he wrote and that the chair edited. It is not something that had a vote by the 9 other people. It is not something the 9 other people on the House Government Operations Committee ever saw or were informed about. So when I hear Patrick say something like, quote, The charter change does not include a lot of what government operations clearly needs, end quote. I must take issue with that. The entire Government Operations Committee did not have a problem with any of these things. The three things that are mentioned in this letter are things that are easily explained, and Ken did a great job with that first one. They are not things that should hold up this charter. All this charter needs is for the select board to get behind it and to inform our state reps. They also should be getting behind it. And if you have any questions as to why any of those things are not issues, please see me or Ken. Every single one of them is very easily and succinctly explainable. Thank you.
Thank you. Betsy and then Lorraine and then Ethan. Betsy, Lorraine, Ethan.
Thank you, Elaine. What I was starting to say the last time during the part about the Australian ballot is that I knew that Greg was supposed to work with Bill on the language or talk to him about it after the last meeting. And my suggestion is have Bill talk to Tucker, who is the legislative counsel for government ops, and explain that this is already in the charter. I was surprised that Tucker didn't look at the charter when he said it, there's nothing here that explains transition. So that Tucker would be aware that it's also there, because that's another big piece. And in order for him to do that, we have to have our representative, and I know Mary Beth will do this, ask Tucker to do that, because any legislative council will do what a legislator will ask, and he can do that. And I think that would be a very nice facilitation of this whole conversation, because then he can say, well, that is here. I see what you're talking about. Or he goes, well, you might want to add these 1, 2, or 3 words to make it easier for the committee. Let's make it work.
Thank you. I lost track. Lorraine?
Yeah, I think it was me, Elaine.
Yep.
Okay, just a quick question. I'm a little
Lorraine,
late.
can you give your whole name for our minutes taker?
My name is Lorraine Zaloom. I'm sorry, I thought I put it in the chat. A quick question. I caught the tail end of what Pat was saying, and am I to understand that he believes there was some confusion about what people were voting on, and they didn't understand what they're voting on? And because I thought a vote was kind of a survey in a way. So if Pat could just have an opportunity to elaborate on what he's referring to, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Ethan.
Oh, Ethan Lawrence again. I have 3 problems with this conversation. Okay, hear me out. So my first problem is the fact that we can't decide on simply making a motion to make a decision. There's been no direction of any decision to be made, and this has been what, 6 months, 7 months? I feel like we've had plenty of time. The response letter has come back long enough. And the second problem I have with the response letter, and maybe I'm the only person that saw this, but the response letter that was shown in the picture had the exact same serial number with 2 different labels. One said Select Board Public, I'm assuming because there was a P after it. And the second one said Trustees, and they were the exact same letter. So I'm a little bit concerned as to why there was 2 letters that were perceived from the House Judiciary Committee, which we saw no signature or stamp on. And why is there 2 of them? And my third and last concern would be being able to hold a special meeting with the fact that a state election would interfere with a certain select board member. And if that's the case, how going forward are we going to be able to represent the people that we need to represent when we're trying to represent a town and a state as a whole? And those are my 3 concerns. Thank you.
Thanks, Ethan. Okay, I don't think there's any other members of the public looking to speak. Pat has his hand up, and then Greg.
Yeah, so Lorraine, just to clarify, I did have a number of individuals who came to me after the election who believe that the 3+3 charter change was the formally presented merger plan that they thought that the boards were giving to the public. even though I believe the select board and the trustees both publicly said that it was a citizen petition, there was still confusion in the community about it. So any reference to that is simply that. I don't believe that there was enough confusion to question the results in any way, shape, or form. It was pretty decisively passed. But again, the fact that there is confusion about that, and there continues to be, even I think earlier tonight, Ken, who attends these meetings and is very well keyed into this, still has questions about how the tax implication, for everyone in town gets parceled out to different departments. So there's a lot of parts here that people just are not always completely up to speed with. The second thing I did want to mention, because I feel like it goes without being questioned very often, is that I am not someone who knows very many people in the state house. I don't hear about this behind the scenes, whatever. So all I can do is I can make decisions based on the information that we receive. We received a letter from the House Government Ops Committee signed by the chair and the vice chair that says that they're tabling this. And they gave the reasons why they believe it's problematic. That's it. That's what I have to go off of. I don't know that the 9 other committee members agree or disagree with that statement. All I know is that when I receive something that's signed by the 2 individuals who are part of that committee and are authorized to send out letters like this, I feel like I have to take them at their word for it, that there are legitimate issues that they have spoken to, and that as select board members, we have to attempt to address them. Or I don't think government ops is just going to send this back to us, and the work that our citizens have done is going to go for naught because they think that there are problems with the proposal as it is right now. They've detailed out what those are, and it's up to us to decide how to address them. I think that's it.
Thanks, Pat. Greg? Oh, I see. After Greg, Patty. I see Patty waving her hand.
I think I can answer one of Ethan's questions. Ethan, I think what you're looking at as far as the numbers on the letter, if you're talking about the 2 tabs up top, those are just, I prep and I have, this is the packet for the select board meeting that we're in right now, and the letter is included in there. So that's the date. If it's the same date right here for the trustee meeting, that's just having the trustee meeting packet ready to be pulled up. So let me know if that's not what you were looking at, but if it is, then that's hopefully your answer.
Yeah, no, thank you. I just wanted to make sure we were seeing both available of all the information. Appreciate that.
Patty?
Okay, now I'm not muted. I just have a question. Is it possible that Ken could actually do what he just did, presenting that little map that he showed, how easy this transition would be to this guy Tucker that Betsy Dunn was talking about, and then explain it and show that visual, and then have that visual as one of the additions that we're going to or amendments that we want to organize on our charter change, because they obviously, the letter said a lot, that this is missing, this is missing, this is missing. Well, if we have someone like Ken or somebody somebody from the public be part of, or at least present to a group of people like Tucker and whoever else, or Mr. Gannon, the vice chair, maybe that would help include the other 9 people too. And, it would just, why not give it all we have? In other words, even if somebody has a brilliant idea from the public, let's include them. That's my suggestion.
Thank you. Mary Beth, Brad, Lorraine.
Thanks, Elaine, and everyone. I appreciate the chance to speak. I just want to say that there are a couple of things that continue to be spoken about that are, I feel, are not accurate. And one of them is the fact that H944, which is the charter change, was something that I sponsored and brought to the Government Operations Committee. We all really have to remember that we were in the middle of the most intensive decisions around COVID. And so that was a big part of it. The GovOps committee had some issues with the charter, but we also, the biggest issue, the biggest overarching issue was the timing of it. They did not have the physical time to take this up and work these things out. What I do want to say is that I've been supportive of this all along, and I will continue to be supportive of it. And however I can be helpful in terms of bridging our town attorney with Tucker and the Government Operations Committee, I continue to be committed to that and will help shepherd it through the legislature. So depending on your decisions as a select board, because you really have to massage it all and feel good about what you want to pass along to the legislature for consideration, I will absolutely do my darndest to bring this to them for approval. So I just wanted to say that very clearly, that my job is not to decide the outcome. That's your job. But my job is whatever you decide, I will then shepherd it and do my darndest to get the Government Operations Committee to approve it. So thanks for the chance to speak.
Thank you. Brad, and then Lorraine, and then Deb.
Mine was an accident.
Oh, okay. Brad, then Lorraine. Brad, I think you're frozen. Let's go with Lorraine, and then hopefully Brad will have his tech fixed by then.
All right, thank you. Lorraine Bloom. Just a quick question on a follow-up on what Pat said. I thought, Pat, did you just say that there were tax implications that people are confused about in terms of 3+3? Because I thought this was just about district representation. Thank you.
Okay.
No, just to clarify, I was attempting to make a point of how even individuals who are really steeped in knowledge and of what goes on with the municipality still aren't fully aware that there are mechanisms in place that affect some parts of town more than the others. It was not to insinuate that anything with 3+3 has tax implications, just simply that there's a lot going on here and not everyone is always aware of it.
Okay, I don't see Brad. Brad dropped off, and I'm guessing he's trying to come back. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak on this issue? Okay. Well, in the interest of time, I think we're going to move on then. Thank you, everyone, for providing your input.
Greg's hand up.
Greg, is that leftover?
Leftover.
Okay, thank you. Would any board members like to move the consent agenda?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
I second it.
Thank you, Pat, for moving, and John for seconding. Any discussion? Andy?
Yeah, my apologies. There seems to be a typo in item B. It says Cafe Mediterrano doing business as Santa Enterprises. It should be the other way around. Santa Enterprises doing business as Cafe Mediterrano, just to be clear. Okay. I neglected to bring that up during the, I don't know if it's important enough to change the agenda for that, but I think it's understood.
A small enough amendment that we can approve with that correction.
Yeah.
One other small amendment. I got word that it should be 58 as opposed to 60 on the address. So another change, just a numbering change.
Okay. Any other questions or comments regarding the consent agenda? Okay, hearing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? The consent agenda passes unanimously. I see that Brad Kennison has rejoined us. Would you like a chance to speak, Brad?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If anyone watched the May 7th online meeting with the Government Ops Committee, they would have known that they did no or a little work on learning about Essex charter, and it was very, very disappointing. And as Patrick mentioned, he's going by the letter only, and it's that's really disappointing. Representative Marcia Gardner made the comment in that meeting that it would be helpful to have the authors or the sponsors of the charter change come and present to the committee, and that hasn't happened. So maybe Mary Beth can make that happen.
Okay, thank you, Brad. Mary Beth, you want to respond to that quickly?
Yes, thanks. Brad, I think you dropped off the call when I made the point that yes, I am willing to shepherd this, and as I did the first time around. Again, COVID, the timing of COVID was a really unfortunate convergence of timeframes. I believe that was the bigger issue. The reason they didn't dive in and get to know Essex and get to know more about it is they did not have the physical time. They also had issues with it, which they clearly stated. I am committed as I was. I sponsored this bill. I will continue to advocate for its passage once the select board decides exactly what the configuration is. I will work with Tucker and John Gannon and all of the folks at GovOps and absolutely help it get approved. I think you fell off when I said that.
I did fall off. It took me a while to get back on. You had moved on to the consent agenda. Well, that would be great because they obviously in that online meeting hadn't done their homework. So it would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Beth. We appreciate that. Okay, returning to the agenda, the last item is a reading file. Does any board member have any questions or comments on the reading file? Okay, then what I propose is that we pause for a few moments while our friends, the trustees, join us for the joint meeting. I see Andrew.
Hello, Elaine and Select Board.
Hello. Why don't we give you a moment to take attendance?
Amber, are you with us?
I'm going to step away for 1 second.
I'm here. No worries, take your time. Hi, Amber. And Dan, are you here?
Yes.
I know that Raj and George will not be joining us tonight, so we have a quorum from the village, but we barely have a quorum from the village. So those are the members, and we can wait for Elaine to come back, as well as other members from the public to come on back before we get started. Hello, Andy. Welcome back. We're just waiting a few moments for everyone to get back, and then we'll get started. Hello, Patrick, your hand's up.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Just a clarification. Since the main focus of this meeting is the Housing Commission interviews, I know that both yourself and Elaine previously have recused yourself. That would drop the trustees below a quorum. So are we going to be able to make appointments tonight, or mechanically, I guess I'm not sure how that would work since we're acting as, sort of a joint group. I'm not sure if we'd still be okay having a quorum of 10 people.
Well, I'll tell you what, why don't we call the meeting to order, and then I can quickly address that, from my portion at least. So I will go ahead and call the Village of Essex Junction Board of Trustees to order for Monday, August 3rd. And so Patrick, just to quickly address that point, I no longer work for Housing Vermont as of whatever 2 weeks ago's date was. As such, I no longer have a conflict of interest in relation to housing, in relation to affordable housing of any type. So I don't have that conflict of interest any longer, so I can fully participate. What I will say, though, is I do not feel that it is right for myself to participate in the selection process, since I wasn't available for the initial conversations of other members. So with that, no, we as the trustees do not have a quorum to be able to make a decision on the members tonight.
Are we therefore going to move forward with the interviews since our guests are here?
Absolutely. In my opinion, I don't think we should have them wait any longer.
No, we should not. And I want to remind both boards that I will not be participating in the deliberations or the selection, as one of the candidates is a coworker of mine.
With that, we have the meeting to order. Are there any agenda additions or changes for the joint meeting?
Nothing from staff.
Anything from the trustees?
Select board?
All good.
Okay.
Great. That will bring us into public to be heard. So this is a portion of the meeting where if somebody from the public would like to speak to the boards about something that is not on the agenda tonight, then now is the time to do so. And I will go ahead and give 30 seconds for the public to let us know if you'd like to speak. That time starts now.
Hello.
Hi, I see that that Edith would like to.
Could I speak now?
Is this Edith?
Yes, this is she.
Yep, then now would work.
Can you see me and hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, I'm new to this.
It's okay.
Hello, my name is Edith Klimoski. I go to Essex High School. I am proposing that a Black Lives Matter mural should be painted in Essex Junction. Racism is a human rights issue that is extremely prominent in Vermont and the entire world today. Nobody should have to fight for their basic human rights. Race needs to stop being criminalized. Black citizens, as well as individuals from other minority groups, face unjust happenings every day, such as police brutality, economic disadvantages, wrongful incarceration, and so on. A Black Lives Matter mural would be thought-provoking to all the citizens who see it. It would cause the community to be more conscious of the struggles the Black community has and are currently facing. Essex should join across other towns in Vermont in supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. I think the mural should be painted in the center of Five Corners intersection. This is a common place to pass through, therefore it would maximize the mural's exposure. This project should be running as soon as possible, if permitted. I plan to create a fundraiser on GoFundMe to raise money for the paint needed to create and maintain the mural. It will be broadcasted widely through the internet and possibly the newspaper if allowed. Any excess money raised will go to organizations such as the Bail Project, Black Alliance for Just Immigration, and Black Lives Matter to show that Essex supports them. Once the money is raised, we should proceed with the painting. My proposition is that it will be painted in mid-August. The work on the mural itself should be done during the night in order to lessen the amount of inconveniences to drivers. A team of people will be needed to direct traffic. and if required, an official of Essex will have to be present. Volunteers will be recruited for the actual design and creation of the mural. It should be made clear that any destruction to the mural would cause great harm. Should any vandalism happen, there will be a similar plan of action to fix the damage as soon as possible. I hope everyone supports this idea in order to show that Essex is supporting this movement. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Edith. Thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you for this this proposal. I want to be very clear that I don't want anything I'm about to say to show any kind of lack of interest, because that's not true. I am interested in seeing this happen. I would love to see it happen right at the intersection of 5 corners. I have some procedural questions, given that they are state routes. I don't know, frankly, if the village trustees have the sole authority to do such a thing on the state routes, or if we need some level of state approval. So given that, and some other questions that I think around how can we do this on a safe manner. I know you talked about having volunteers, you talked about doing it in the middle of the night. I appreciate that, thank you. I think we need to have a little bit of time to have some of the legal and procedural questions answered to know what we can do. So then that way, when we know what we can do, we can then have a vote, yes or no. So that would be my proposition.
Okay, I don't believe 5 Corners is a state route. I thought it was just part of the village. I'm not positive about that. Or I was thinking if it couldn't be in the middle of 5 Corners, it could be like on one of the roads leading into the intersection, or near the high school or something.
So we do have, that's the intersections of State Route 15, State Route 17, and State Route 2A. As they are state routes, there is some level of ownership. I know that there are also, once we get towards the railroad tracks, things really get confusing, as there are then multiple layers of owners between the railroad company, between some utility companies, that make things very, very tricky. And so those are the kinds of things that we need to really dive into. Even Railroad Street, which is a village, or I'm sorry, Railroad Avenue, which is a village street, is one that has various levels of easements on it from utilities and the railroad companies, and that we can't just do whatever we want on that street. We could right on the middle of Brickyard Road, but then you'd have much less traffic to see and to appreciate. So that's the only reason why I say if we could have some answers to those procedural questions, then I think we as a board could have an actual more informed conversation and debate about it and a vote on it.
Okay, that makes sense. We also, I wasn't saying 5 Corners is like a definite spot. I just thought the project should get up and running as soon as possible. I'd really like to make it happen, and so I can start the fundraiser to go along with it.
Great. What I think we can do is Greg or Evan or staff at some point, would you be able to get some answers to those questions within, would you say, a week? Is that too little time?
Yeah, we can. Tomorrow we will reach out to VTrans, which is the Department of Transportation, about those roads, and try to get an answer of what their concerns might be and limitations.
Great. Thank you, Evan. I appreciate that. Patrick, I see you have a question.
I do. Edith, I appreciate you coming in tonight. When I learned that this was going to be something coming forward tonight, I did reach out to Tilly Krishna and the EHS Social Justice Group. They weren't aware of the project, but they would be thrilled to help out in some way. So I'm not sure if you've had any opportunity to do so, but if not, I'd be happy to connect you to the group at the high school that would, again, if you're looking for volunteers, looking for people to assist, they would be, they mentioned that they were very excited to, see something like this happen.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Should I leave my email so anyone who can contact me who needs to about the roads and everything and all that. Should I write it in the chat or something so it's easiest?
That would be great.
Thank you so much.
No, I think you should probably send an email to the boards rather than put your email out in the chat, just so that
I agree.
other members of the community don't, have your email. You can keep it private.
Good idea, Vince.
I don't know how to email the boards directly.
I believe
Edith, you can email the manager, his email, or you can email Greg, who you've been emailing with already, and Darren also. Any one of those folks can get your email to us.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Well done, Edith.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so next, Margaret, I believe you wanted to speak.
Yes, hi, thank you. This is totally not related to anything on the agenda. I dropped off my absentee ballot at the town office today, and I would like to suggest that maybe the town should get a slightly larger drop-off mailbox. It was really hard to stuff the ballot into the drop-off mailbox, and as the office is closed, you can't deliver it in person. It fit, but it was not happy. So I just wanted to pass that along because I'm sure there are going to be other people having the same issues that I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Dawn, I see your hand is up.
The box is on order. It will be here as soon as it's able to be delivered. Probably not for the primary, but it will be here for the November election. It's a giant locked box with plenty of room for everybody.
Oh, that's
great.
responsive.
Thank you. Yeah.
Great. And is there anybody else from the public? See no hands up. I didn't see anybody else in the chat. Given that, we are ready to move on to our business items. And the first one being interviews for the Housing Commission. I would like to start off with an appreciation and a thank you and an apology for keeping those who are here for the interviews this late. Sorry about that, so let's just jump right into it. First up I see is Katie Ballard. Katie, are you here?
Yes, I am here.
Hi, Katie.
Hi.
So we on the boards, we've seen the packet, we've seen your introductory letter. Most people in the public have not. So why don't we just start off with a little bit about who you are and why you're interested.
So a few weeks ago, Patrick actually reached out and shared that there was an opportunity. And so when I checked it out, I realized it was something that I would very much be interested in. There's a few reasons. The best way to explain it is I actually came to the Essex community when my family and I had a house fire back in 2012 up in the islands. We decided we wanted to be in an amazing school system, and since we had to make a change anyway, we ended up in Essex. I'd love to say that that was a smooth journey and that we were welcomed with open arms and that there was affordable housing and that the school treated us just like they treat everyone else. Unfortunately, that wasn't my experience as a disabled mom, supporting my 3 kids and my family on just my disability income. It is very challenging to find affordable housing. We struggled, and then due to some other circumstances beyond our control, ended up having to give up our lease in the town to avoid eviction after some struggles with the district. We ended up doubled up for 2.5 years, commuting to Essex to keep our kids in school where they had been before, and finally found an apartment in the Brickyard about 3 years ago. And I have to say that this commission spoke to me because I think it's such important work for our community to do, not just around the development conversations, but really around how we talk about each other, how we think about our community, how we as a community want to move forward together. And so I hope to bring my experience as a disabled person and the ADA and understanding the legalities of renting to people who are in those populations, as well as people first language, and ensuring that everybody in our community, whether you're a renter, a homeowner, a property owner, or a business owner, are treated with the dignity and respect that I know our community believes in.
Thank you. Other board members? Patrick?
Katie, thanks for being here tonight. Can you give us a little bit more about your background in advocacy work? Because I know that, obviously you're here for Housing Commission, but part of the reason why I mentioned this opening to you is that I know that you've done a lot of advocacy work in other areas as well. Could you just talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Specifically in terms of homelessness, I actually began really focusing on the education of homeless children in Vermont about 5 years ago. And from that, I started working with some national advocacy organizations. I attended the National Conference on Ending Youth and Family Homelessness in Los Angeles on a full scholarship 2 years ago. I worked at a new place in Burlington. It's a homeless shelter, a transitional home, as their outreach director, and then as the intake coordinator for the low barrier shelter for part of the winter. In addition to all of the advocacy I do for homelessness, I represent Disability Rights Coalition on the Strengthening Family and Child Poverty Advisory at the State House. And I have recently been endorsed as a parent representative for the State Special Ed Advisory. Due to COVID, we're waiting for our final appointment papers, but I'm told that's going through as well.
Great. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Andy?
Yeah, first, I guess I want to say I'm not turning my camera on today because I had eye surgery and it's not pretty, so I just don't want to share that. So Katie,
You're okay.
Yeah, I'm fine. Katie, the purpose of the commission isn't just for affordable housing, it's for all housing in general. Just wondering if you have thoughts about older residents who are interested in downsizing, or the fact that family sizes are getting smaller. What issues do you see in those realms?
I mean, as a housing advocate, I think you see issues across all populations, across all different ages. I think there's definitely a big concern for elderly folks who are looking to downsize and are unable to find affordable or accessible housing. I think accessible is a huge issue when you talk about the ADA. I also think that families, I have 3 kids myself, so I can very much appreciate the need for more family units in Essex, and also balancing the needs of the community at large. I think one of the best things about Essex is there is so much diversity and there's so many different places in our community. I think it would be really hard to speak broadly for everything. I think it depends on where in the community the housing or the questions are coming up and what the needs are for that specific area.
Okay, thank you, Katie.
Thank you. I will say I do not come to this with the housing experience that many of the candidates do, but I do come to this with a desire to learn, a passion for policy, and an ability to have reasonable conversations about just about any conversation, given an opportunity to research it in advance.
Thank you for that. Any other board members have questions? Vince?
Hey, I just wanted to say that my mother and her family also moved from the islands when she was around high school age. They had 5 kids, moved on to Taft Street over in the Junction. And, they've echoed some of the same things you echoed about not being treated as part of the community, or maybe kind of being looked on differently. not just from the Essex community, but from the community they came from, which I know is a big thing out in the islands. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for telling your story.
Thank you.
Any other members have questions? Okay, I see no hands up. Nobody's waving around, so I'm assuming not. Katie, we all appreciate your time tonight. Thank you for sticking it out.
Absolutely. Thank you all for all the work you do.
And I'm sure we will be in touch as soon as we make a decision, which, as you may have just heard, won't be tonight. So it'll probably take a few weeks.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. And next on the list is Anthony Barr. Anthony, are you here? Anthony Barr, are you with us tonight?
Anthony, we can't hear you.
If you're with us, Anthony, you are not unmuted.
His mouth was moving, but no sound.
Oh, I don't even see his face on here.
Not hearing you yet.
He's in the chat.
If you hover over the bottom, there's a screen that pops up, and there's 3 dots. If you click on those and go to device settings, show device settings, there's an option for microphone. You might have to adjust that. Or another option, I can give you the call-in number. That way you can at least get the audio. I will type it into the chat. Give me a moment.
Thank you, Greg.
Hear me now?
Oh, I just heard now.
There you go.
Am I making it through, or?
You are. You're a little choppy, but let's give it a shot.
Sure.
So I don't know if you heard the first question. Thank you for being here. As I mentioned, we have as board members, we have the packet that you had sent in. But if you just want to give us a little background as to who you are and why you're interested in the commission, that'd be a great way to start off.
Sure. My name's Anthony Barr, and I moved here about 2 years ago when I decided it was time to leave my hometown, and I got a job at Global Foundries. And recently Pat had came to me and asked me if I would be interested, and I told him I was, because I would like to do things to help improve people's standard of living. And as somebody who pays more than half my wages in rent, I know that there's a cost issue here. So I didn't have a full answer thought out. Sorry about that. But yeah, so there.
Great. Thank you. Other board members? Patrick?
Anthony,
Hey.
thanks for being here tonight. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you've done in Essex since moving here? How you've been involved in the community, so we can get an idea of how you might fit into a role like this.
Sure. Recently I had put together we call it the Stand for Solidarity after the George Floyd thing that happened, and that had a decent amount of people come and call for criminal justice change. That had been something I had done recently, and I had also started recently volunteering at Aunt Dot's place, the food shelter there.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Other Andy.
Yeah, Tony, thanks for coming to interview here. Question I have is, I know that climate change is a big worry on a lot of people's minds, and there's legislation that's coming through at the state level that there's some intent to try to address that, which may change or may have an impact to how much it costs to build in certain areas. Do you have any thoughts about how climate change policy might affect future housing trends?
The costs definitely will go up, I think. So there will need to be subsidies probably for lower income families that are moving towards that. So I'm sure there's a lot of research that'll need to be done to figure things out like that.
Okay. All right. Sounds like a learning opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. This whole thing would be a very much a learning opportunity for me.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Other board members have questions? Vince?
I just wanted to know, what were some of the challenges you faced in finding affordable housing in Essex, just personally?
Sure.
And sorry, and how that you'll take that experience and use that on this board.
So, in looking for buying a house around here, the prices are pretty steep for anybody, even with a decent income. You're buying individually. So that's something that I'm currently looking at now, and it might not be a reality to be able to buy a house in Essex for someone like me. And that would be a shame, because it's a beautiful area and it's a very nice town here. So that's one of the struggles. When I came here, it was hard to find a place to rent in general, because I have a dog, and find a place that would allow dogs was very complicated. Nonetheless, without an extra $500 security deposit and all those extra added things onto it.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep.
And other board members have questions? All right, Anthony, it doesn't appear that there are. We appreciate your time tonight. If you can give us a few weeks, we'll make a decision by then and let you know how it turns out.
Is it required that I stay for the rest of the meeting, or am I good?
You are free to go.
All right, thank you.
Enjoy your night. And next we have Evan Einhorn. Evan, if you're with us, go ahead and you can unmute yourself.
Oh, there we go. I figured it out.
Great.
Sorry, I was delayed. Technical difficulties, but finally got over them.
No worries. Happy to have you here.
Thank you.
If you could go ahead and start off with a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in the Housing Commission.
I've been in the affordable housing industry since 2009, and I'm sorry, 1994. Jesus. I did tech support for a software company called A&M Software. It was based out of the Fort, and then moved on to where did we go? Blair Park. And after doing tech support, I did training all across the country, going to different sites. I keep looking to my left, so I apologize. I'm looking at this big screen and not looking ahead. So I've been to many properties across the country. I've been to all but 4 states, and I understand all the housing HUD and rules and regulations. I teach them throughout the country, and I feel like I hope I can be a big help in guiding things in the affordable housing industry here.
Great, well, thank you. And board members? Go ahead, Patrick.
Evan, thanks for being here tonight. Really appreciate you coming. Could I, similar to our other candidates, have you had any experience, or could you tell us a little bit about living in Essex, your interaction with the community here, just so we have some background about, obviously you have some very impressive work experience, but I'd like to know a little bit more about, how you've interacted with the community, how you found Essex, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. I moved here in 1985. Started living in Burlington, then eventually found my mate, and we moved to from Williston. We moved to Essex Junction, so we've been here about 17 years. I've been on the Countryside Housing Association board as president, now vice president, and a director for the past, I guess, over 10 years. And so I've interacted with our community a lot. My kids, I have 3 boys. 2 of them participate in sports. So it's a lot of not just bring your kids to the game, but you participate in putting on all these events such as wrestling. For the past 10 years, one of my kids has been wrestling for 10 years. My oldest son has been playing baseball. So again, you can't just sit on the sidelines. You must participate and work with the community. And I've enjoyed that very much, although it's an arduous task sometimes, but we get it done. And when I say not sitting on the sidelines, there are plenty of parents who don't participate that way, but it's important. I felt it was important to stay involved. So as far as reaching out to the community, that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Great. Thank you very much.
Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Evan. You mentioned that you've done affordable housing training, and just looking for more detail of what that means, and if there are any particular highlights of that should be taken into consideration in Essex.
It's a lot of public speaking. It's a lot of webinars and teaching online. It's a lot of doing big events such as conferences, housing association conferences across the country. It's interacting with everybody and all the owners, property managers, going to Washington, D.C. every year for our annual conference, and coming up with ways to make lives easier for the residents of affordable housing. I feel like I'm an advocate for the property managers, but I always encourage the property managers and owners to be advocates for their tenants. And in some cases, or I should say in most cases, they are. Of course, there's always people that violate the Fair Housing Act and things like that, and of course they get in trouble. But fair housing is one of the things that I teach, and I'm very sensitive to. But I've enjoyed my livelihood very much.
Okay, thank you.
Other board members have questions? Doesn't appear. Oh, go ahead.
I don't
Go ahead.
my hand up. Anyway, it's just this is Dan Karen. Just going to ask you a quick question. With your experience in affordable housing throughout the country, and you said you've been to every state except for 4 states, how does Vermont, specifically, how does Essex fare with what you've seen around the country?
Our properties are a lot nicer than most. I've seen some really nice properties in other areas, but we have a lot of new affordable housing. And I think that's, I always think whenever I go to these properties, would I ever want my mom to live in a place like this or something? So I think especially around Essex Junction, we have a lot of new affordable housing. It's very convenient to a lot of the amenities that the rest of us enjoy. And I think we have a good environment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other board members? Alrighty, now it appears as though we're all set. Evan, really appreciate you being here tonight. Not sure if you heard me say to the others, we're not going to make a decision on candidates tonight, so it's going to be a couple of weeks, but we'll let you know as soon as a decision is made.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
Letting me participate.
Thanks for coming.
All right. Have a good night.
You as well, thank you. And next, I believe we have Hera Hagen. And if I mispronounced your first name or last, I really apologize.
It's okay. It's really, really, really common. So my name's Ara.
Ara.
Ara. That was close. You got an ARA. So my name's Ara Hagen. I come at this from, I've been in Essex now for 8 years. I have 2 kids, but I come at it from a slightly different angle of I came to Essex and I lived here, and then I had my son, my second child, and was like, oh, needing to commute to the office in South Burlington was really far. And I was like, wait, I run my own business. Why don't I move my office to where I live? Which rare to be able to be in the position to do that. But I did that, and I worked in and leased a space up in the town. And I was there for a long time and loved it. And then my landlord switched, and my landlord experience was not overtly pleasant, to the point where I was like, I need to get out of here. Where can I go? Where can I move to have my employees be? I need to figure something out that's sort of a safe environment for my employees, something that's acceptable for customers, sort of the whole package. And I spent maybe about a year trying to figure out how to move my business, which for moving a business, it takes a lot. And it was really hard to find some place within Essex, and I ended up going the route of finding a property that I could fix up. So I've gone from being a leaseor in Essex town to I now own a building in Essex Junction for my business, Hagen Associates. And via that, I've done lots of work for nonprofits. So I am on the board of Green Up Day, and I've also worked with like Boys and Girls Club in Burlington, the Maker Fair that had 7 years at Shelburne Farms, where it really worked for education and kids and STEM, so trying to get math and science tied together and being an event that like everybody could go to, as well as doing stuff with like Vermont PBS and VPR. But I haven't done a ton within Essex Junction, which is where I actually like live. I've been a little broader to most of Chittenden County. So I saw this come up in Front Porch Forum, and I was like, oh, I at least know the business side and how wacky that is, and things from a commercial lease or from a commercial owner, like what you have to do or what you're looking for and different obstacles you see there. So I feel like I have that sense of it. I also have the sense of the affordable housing, how it all interconnects in our community. I would say just in Essex Junction where I live, I'm amazed at the prices of houses. It is one where I'm like, oh, would I have bought a house here? Like that we bought 8 years ago. It's like wacky how much housing prices have gone up. Yay, interest rates are low, but I would say it is something that costs have risen quite a bit. So it's an area of immense interest. I don't necessarily have as much experience in the affordable housing category as others in knowing a lot about it, but I'm a hard worker and I've just sort of made my own of it from the get-go. So I've just sort of, I'm very apt to wanting to learn more. We'll do research to figure it out and figure stuff out that I don't know. I'm also completely fine saying I don't know and learning from other people or finding other people who can tell me what's right. So I don't know if humble's the right word, but I definitely know I don't know everything. So I'm good with going out and asking, but that's where I'm coming at it from, is just business owner. I've been in the world for a bit. I've run my own business, so it's 100% me, so a female business owner for the last, feels like 10 years or so. It's been a while, but I think I'm up on 10 or 11 years. So that's sort of my stick quickly.
Well, thank you, and thank you for locating and staying in Essex, and now you have great ice cream and pizza right next door.
I know. I do.
So,
yeah, I went from Nemo's to Rockies.
yep. Patrick, go ahead.
Ara, thanks so much for joining us tonight. So my question you actually kind of already covered that I've been using as a go-to about what you've done. I did have a question though. You've mentioned your work. What exactly is that though? Hagen and Associates. Yeah. What do you do, and how does that, or at least how do you feel that can relate to work that you might do on the Housing Commission?
So that's one where Hagen Associates is a marketing agency. So we're a full-fledged marketing agency. That means we do like print brochures, market research, collateral, design, websites, ads on Facebook, Instagram, national buys across the board. So our clients, depending on what's needed, we do advertisement. So ads, we run social media accounts. We do public relations and PR. I do some ghostwriting, so I know how to write for different individuals, as well as websites and design. So it's one from a community standpoint. The area of marketing gives me a good knowledge base of how to communicate effectively via like, how do we, if we have something we want to say, how do we get it out to different people via ads in its simplest form. So that would be the fundamental connection. With that, over the years, I actually worked a little bit on HUD, going way back. I didn't even think about that. I was like, oh, it's maybe about like 10 years ago, so it's a while ago. Same with the lead for CEDO, CEDO. It was, again, maybe about 10 years ago, but they had a lead program. So we worked with developing postcards. So we created the postcards that went out to all the landlords about the free money to work on getting lead paint removed. So I have, I would say, benefit of marketing is I know a whole bunch about all sorts of stuff. So I know a ton about HVAC. I know about lead paint. I know about housing, the Vermont Housing Commission. I also worked with the area of affordable housing in Randolph. So helped do public relation to kick off their event when they were working on building a house for individuals to use.
Awesome.
So
Great.
it's just a period of time.
No, that's perfect. Awesome. Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm.
Other board members? Andy?
Oh, I'm saying something because I feel like I'm obliged to. You left me at a loss for questions. You covered a lot of territory there. So.
I could circle back to your, what about solar?
What's that?
I was pondering, like, what would I do if Andy asked me the solar question?
About climate change?
Yeah, climate change.
Well, now he's going to give you a different one. Mix it up.
I had time to prep for that one.
Or I could challenge you and ask you the climate change one. So you live in the Junction. You're in the Village.
Yep, I'm in the Village.
Okay. And you know, one of the comments that I try to get to, I guess, with the climate change question is it's possible, depending on how policy goes, that it will become more expensive. There'll be incentives to move to development centers rather than live in rural areas. And I just wonder if you have any thoughts about what the implications of that kind of policy might have on Essex, which has quite a bit of rural area.
Yeah, and yeah, I have friends, quite a number of friends who live in town, and as well as the Junction. So I think that's a really interesting question, is there's a component of, I feel like, solar, as well as the gathering of energy sort of cells and the distribution of that energy, where the town has the ability of having access to land. But I've seen over the years that there's also different things where you can do solar panels within the shingles on your roof. So like there's a component of my head that thinks like, well, you can have energy, you can have larger solar fields, or you can do communal properties, meaning like where you might have 20 houses in like a cul-de-sac, but you can gather and store their power and distribute it sort of for the Commonwealth. So there's a component of, I think, like the gathering, anybody who can gather the energy can help there. I think within efficiencies of, yes, you can get more people into a smaller building. I think that is sort of, there's an efficiency there. But I think in the town, you have the ability to potentially access more renewable energy. I'm hesitating because in my head, I'm just like, oh, you have potential negatives of like if you had windmills or anything like that, it disrupts the view, it's in my backyard. So there's issues. So I don't know if I would go that far. But I think there's components where there might be more that could be used. Don't know if that answers your question, Andy. That was a good question.
Well, yeah, I think what you've done is exposed your thought process, which I think was good. So thank you.
There you go.
Other board members. I'm gonna venture to say it looks like everybody's all set.
Uh-huh. All right, thank you guys, and thanks for doing the good work, just sort of moving us along. It's a long road, so appreciate your time that you guys put in pretty much every day, actually. I was about to say every week, but every day.
Well, we appreciate you being here tonight, and we'll let you know in a few weeks how things turn out.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
And so next we have Debbie McAdoo.
Hello.
Hi. If you'd like to, thank you for being here. So if you'd like to start off a little bit with a little bit about yourself, your background, and why you're interested.
Okay, why I am here. I am here because a trustee, who is not Patrick, asked me to be here. And then I also saw the second request for help, and if you ask twice, you need help, so here I am. I come from a family that values many hands make light work, and we've got a lot of work to do in the housing field. So I thought that maybe I have some history of working in housing. At one point in my life, I was employed by the state of Vermont, and I worked in the Department of Disabilities and Aging, and my job was to create residential alternatives to nursing homes. So I spent a lot of time focusing on housing for the aging, working with licensed housing, public housing, private housing, and just trying to find accommodations for people. It was a challenge, and it really does take a village. When we went to some ribbon cuttings, you'll see many, many organizations because there's so many pots of money that have to come in, or this organization has to come in because they can get the low-income housing tax credits, and your Housing Vermont, you know. So yeah, I appreciate what it takes, and so if I can do my little part, I have no buckets of money to bring.
Well, thank you. And just clarification, I was with Housing Vermont, no
That's
longer as of 2.5 weeks ago.
I don't know if I should say congratulations or not.
It's okay.
Okay.
It was my choice. But anyway, enough about me. So, board members, some questions. Patrick.
Deb, thanks for being here tonight. I'm actually really interested in what you said about alternatives for senior housing. Could you talk about that a little bit more? I just
Sure.
get an idea for, again, we're as part of this commission, obviously, they're looking at a broad range, and I think most people are thinking, the nursing home communities, are just, kind of just apartment buildings, kind of stacked on top of
No,
one
they're
another.
far from
So
that.
yeah, I would love to hear more about your work on
Okay.
that.
So what we did, I had the good fortune of working under Commissioner Patrick Flood, who's a very dynamic person, if anyone knows him. He's very intelligent, and he started off as an LNA. So he came a long way, and he really knew what he was talking about. We were lucky. We've got a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation grant, and I had the good fortune of working on that grant. My job was to establish life safety standards for licensed assisted living in the state of Vermont. First, we had to define it. We had to understand what people needed, what are the needs of older people or people with adults with disabilities in housing. So it was really a lot of learning and then helping other people understand. One of the things that I found very cool about that experience is that I worked with 2 different state departments. One of them were the life safety guys, and those are your firemen who just, safety is the only thing they could see. And then I also worked with the licensing people, which were all nurse surveyors, and all they could see was healthcare and people's abilities. And so when I got them together, it really took a while, but we figured out that nobody was understanding that you don't need 6-foot wide hallways because you're not passing in beds in senior housing. Everybody's upright walking, you need at least 3 feet for the wheelchair to get through. So a lot of physical accommodations that had to go in. But there was more than that. There's also supportive services. One of the things that we found is that a lot of people were having to go to nursing homes, either because their adult children who lived out of state were nervous, or because they couldn't clean their house. They just couldn't keep up with the housework. So we found that if we use some of the monies to free up services and be able to not have non-licensed help go in, then they could actually have someone clean their house, and seniors were allowed to live in their homes for as long as they wanted to. So it was really a huge commitment to aging in place. There was a lot of mechanisms with Medicaid that manipulated service packages that could go in for people so that they could stay in the licensed care settings longer. And the assisted living really took off. It was really, a lot of people really enjoyed it because it's not your traditional nursing home. We set it up so that people could have a bedroom, a cooking area, their own private bathroom. That was really a big deal, would be for me. And so we really set it up. And then they also had the 24/7 presence that kept them safe. And so everyone, it was really a win-win, and everyone really came to it. And I think it's really taken off in Vermont. And as I get older, I'm grateful that it's there for an option for me one day, maybe.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Andy, looks like you're ready.
Yeah, Patrick asked part of my demographic question. So you did mention though, aging in place. So, folks who want to stay in their own home or who want to downsize from, the house that they raised their family into something smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Wondering if you have comments around that segment of the older population, and then also I don't know if you have any comments about the fact that family sizes are getting smaller. Whether you have any comments on how that affects housing policy.
Sure, I have a lot of comments about it, but I'll limit myself because it's late. Okay, so first of all, I already forgot what your question was. I'm supposed to be in bed a half an hour ago.
So the question about people either staying in their own home or finding an appropriate smaller. Yep.
So there's a lot of really nice programs in Vermont. One of the ones that I really admired was Housing Vermont. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not. If I'm telling you something you already know, stop me. But it's a program that actually sets people up so that a senior who is living in their home alone, who might need a little bit of assistance, they might need somebody to do grocery shopping or somebody to mow the lawn, then they could negotiate through Housing Vermont. They have a matching program, and they can connect someone who goes through a background check so that safety is always the priority when you're working with vulnerable populations. But then once they go through the screening, they could actually move into the senior's house, pay minimal rent, and supplement the rent with services that they provide to the older person they're living with. That's really a nice way of working things out. It's hard because I know that it started in Chittenden County, it branched out down to central Vermont, and then to be honest, I've lost touch with it since I've left the state. So I don't know if it's still out there. I have seen it advertised, and it's something that I think people could take advantage of. I also think that, it's interesting. I have 3 kids that grew up in Essex in my big old house here. And now, each cat has their own room. What do I do with this? I don't necessarily want it, but my husband does. So here I am. So I guess, when you think about those kinds of situations, I think each person has to make their own determination of what they can do. And I think that your financial ability has a lot to guide you on that one. I also think that it's interesting. I wish my kids could afford a house and move in next to me, but that's not going to happen because wages don't go up, and everybody knows that the economy isn't what it used to be. And And then when you come out of college and you have your student loans and you just, it's not going to work. So you do have to look for more creative housing. Some of the things that I know that there's one, what is it, East Avenue, where they have the co-op housing. And this is multi-generational housing. And it's an experimental thing, but it's really, I think it's kind of neat. Because if if you don't have grandchildren, or if you don't want to have children, but you still want to have the influence of them in your neighborhood, then there you are. Or if a family, if a small family lives away from their extended family, then in this kind of multi-generational housing, they could have kind of built-in grandparents, if you will. So there's some creative options out there. I just don't think that, I don't think the money that we need to create more is out there. And so we have to get a little more creative and get through this current situation that we're in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. You're not going to ask me about solar power?
Not today.
I had an answer.
I'll ask you about solar power. What's your thought?
Okay, cool. Well, I just happen to be a research administrator at the Rubenstein School for the Environment and Natural Resources. And so I'm really into paying attention to taking care of the environment, because if you don't have a planet, you're not going to have a house anyway. And I think that we have a long way to go. I think, is it like the second oldest housing stock in Vermont? And we really do need to do something about that. I just took advantage of an energy program for myself that I can't believe I didn't do it sooner. And I think that programs like that really make a difference. And so we really do need to help people weatherize their homes. I think that we do have to try and hang on to this old housing stock. I think that, who was it? Somebody was talking about the solar panels that are going to be so small. It's going to be awesome. So I'm really looking forward to all of the new ways of keeping electricity and keeping our cars going and keeping our planet clean. Otherwise, it doesn't matter.
Any other board members have questions? Doesn't appear as so. Deb, thank you for being here. We really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you for staying as late as you have.
Thank you all. And I don't know, you must have no-dos in your soda there or something. Good luck and keep it up. Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
And next we have Pam. Pam, are you with us?
Oh, I am. I just had to unmute.
Great.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly fine. Thank you for joining us tonight. And if you'd like to start off a little bit about yourself, we're interested.
Well, I'm 60 years old, and I grew up under the poverty line. And the one thing I wanted as a child was to own my own home and live in a house. And on Sundays, my mother would take us to new housing developments, and we'd go in them and look at them, and they were so nice. And I just wanted a house. And when I came to Vermont, I worked for Perry Restaurant Group, and I oversaw Sweetwater's, Perry's Fish House, Sirloin Saloon. And I worked with Tony for 25 years. And I bought my first house for $150,000 in Charlotte. I invested $50,000 or $60,000 into it, lived in it for 10 years, loved it, met a man, and we decided we needed to have a slightly bigger house. I love real estate. I am the director of the Business Enterprise Program. I'm subcontracted by the state to provide training and development to folks that are blind or visually impaired. My program is housed in Resource, and most of you probably know Resource. Resource is a community organization that works with vulnerable populations. We have all kinds of programs to help people get out of poverty and get working and get reestablished in the community. So when we moved, my father-in-law and my mother-in-law lived in the house we live in now. He passed away, and my mother-in-law couldn't take care of the house. It's about 4,000 square feet. We moved her into a senior living home, but then we got stuck with 4,000 feet of space, and our kids, were in their 20s and kind of doing their own thing. We couldn't afford the taxes here in Essex, and we were both working, but it just was too much. So we took a third of the house and we made a accessory apartment. And we've been renting that now for 7 years. And that helps support paying the taxes. And over the years, because we don't have a pension plan, we decided to invest in some real estate. So we own 3 investment properties, and we wanted them to be within 10 minutes of where we live so that we could be good landlords. So we own a property at 5 Corners. We own the accessory apartment that's attached to our house here. And we own a property in Jericho where my husband lived before we met. So we just didn't sell it, we rented it. I consider myself and my husband really good landlords. And, you know, we don't raise the rent. And we philosophically really work closely with our tenants. And we start out by letting them know that we both have jobs and we're not really interested in being landlords for a job. So if they work with us and I don't have to become a landlord, then I don't need to be paid as a landlord, which means I don't need to raise the rent. So we have really long-term tenants, and they love living in Essex. And I think there's so much opportunity around affordable housing. I could talk about affordable housing for days. My sister-in-law, who we own 20 acres here, and we gave a lot to my sister and brother-in-law. She works for Cathedral Square. So we talk all the time about housing and affordable housing and how to manage tenants. And I'm a little disjointed, but going from the restaurant business to the work I do now, I was offered a job by Jack Russell, who owns Century 21 Jack Associates, to run one of his real estate offices. Because I don't know, I find housing, alternative housing, I find the whole idea of housing just really interesting. One of my managers wanted to make more of an income, and she lives in Bolton. And so I said to her, you need to buy a tiny house. So she bought a tiny house for $8,000. She put it on her lot. And because of the virus now, she's had that rented out because couples that are both working didn't want to live in the same house. So she's rented it out for a month to 2 different people for a month at a time so that they could be separated from their families so that, you know, they wouldn't be worried about contamination. So I see tiny houses as an option. I love looking at how people are repurposing materials to make housing, whether it's these big tubes that they make housing into. Off of Sand Hill Road, right at the bottom of Sand Hill Road, there's a guy that's building tiny houses, and he's got one out front that people can go and see. We have a lot down on River Road. It's about 3.5 acres, and then our house sits behind it. I have so imagined having tiny house community down there where someone's paying $500 in rent. They got their tiny house, they got a community garden, and the bus stop is right at the bottom of Sand Hill Road. So you're giving them public transportation to get where they need to go. So I'm excited about pulling a group of people together, talking about this, expanding our resources, whether I'm in the state every single day. I'm subcontracted by the Division for the Blind, and I create these businesses for legally blind folks to run. And so we have 3 cafes, one at 32 Cherry Street at the courthouse, one at the Department of Health, and one at the new Waterbury complex. So I run into everybody in the state because, you know, food is that mutual comfort. And so they all come into the cafes and we get to talk about different topics. And when I moved to Vermont and decided to live in Essex, I decided to get involved in the town. And I went to a select board meeting and they started talking about budgets and money. And Irene was in charge of finance at the time. And she was awesome. I went to her and I said, listen, you're talking about a budget I don't know anything about. Can I meet with you and go over the budget? And Irene invited me to her house. And she and I spent, my memory correct, 3.5 hours at her house going over the budget. Because that's my background. If I'm going to live in this town, I need to know where you spend your money, what do you spend your money on. If I have an opinion, it needs to be based on information. She did an incredible job going through that budget with me. And then I was on the zoning board for, I think, 2 terms. And I also volunteer with the Essex Community Justice Center. And I volunteered at Restore for 4 years. And I understand how Habitat works in terms of housing. and resource, which we do a lot with landlords and developers in terms of supplies and things like that. So the whole idea of affordable housing is really interesting to me. And I know that the politicians have been sending out flyers, little postcards, which I have really enjoyed. I have called every one of the politicians on their phones and had conversations with them about their platforms, their policy, and affordable housing has come up in many of those conversations, which I've really appreciated. And so I know who I'm voting for because of those conversations. And one of the topics has been affordable housing. Not to, Thomas Chittenden, good candidate. So I think that the idea of being on this committee will enable me to just expand and use the experience I have, the desire to really want to make a difference. I'm 60. I don't necessarily need to make a ton more money. I don't really need to own more. I just need to make an impact at this point in my life. And if I can do it with affordable housing, then that would be great. It's just a combination of everything I like to do.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Board members, any questions? Go ahead, Patrick. You two can fight it out.
There we go. No. I need to make sure I was unmuted. Pam, you mentioned something I like to talk a little bit about as your experience as a landlord in particular. I think around COVID-19. I think that this commission, going forward, is they're going to be living with the reality of an extended economic downturn. Can you talk maybe about what you may have done as a landlord for your tenants during this time, or what you see as possible issues? Because certainly landlords have had extensive problems for tenants who have been out of work, can't pay their rent. Getting it from your perspective, if you just want to briefly talk about that, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so everybody was able to pay their rent because fortunately, luck would have it that everyone was an essential worker. So we have a gentleman who's a truck driver and his wife. So he's been very busy. We have a gentleman who sells beverages for barrels, and people are drinking, that is for sure. So he has been very busy, so it hasn't been a problem for him. My other tenant works for Howard Mental Health, and he's been very busy. He deals with the youth segment. The one challenge I've had is that at this point in my life, I try to make decisions about doing the right thing. Doesn't always mean it's the easiest thing. Doesn't always mean it's the most profitable, but it feels like it's the right thing. So I rented to a couple who had a newborn baby, and they were in an unsafe place. The rent's not high, and I rented to them, and I got some co-signers. I didn't anticipate that the relationship wouldn't work out, and he had he has a criminal background. And so that in itself creates a challenge around affordable housing. That's another old topic. But so she left him. Well, she was the one paying the rent. She was the one that was a great communicator. She was the one that was available when there was needs, would communicate with me about what the needs were. He lacks a lot of those things. So she left him in the house. He was working, decided not to work anymore, started drinking, started acting out again. And so I'm left with this person, and he has decided, although he got a job, he's decided to text me several times and tell me that he will not be paying the rent. And he feels like there's an option for me to get the rent from the state, and so that I should take advantage of that program and get the rent from them so that he can save his money. And I feel like it's a very complicated situation because he could pay the rent and, he'll have extra money. I mean, the rent is like $1,100. It's not a tremendous rent for what he gets. I've posed this question to every candidate I've spoken to, and I've asked them, what would you do if you were in my shoes? And what happens with this stabilization program is if I apply for that for him, they will send him an email. He has to apply as well. If he does not apply, we get half the rent paid. I also have to report that I know he's working. And I told him, I said, I have to report that I know you're working. And so he said, well, go ahead and tell them that. I said, okay. So I'm applying for the program. I don't know what he's going to do, but the whole idea is that if he doesn't apply, then he recognizes that he is, that I can evict him, although I can't evict anybody until September. And he knows that as well. So he's not a good example of a good tenant. And I'm working really hard. I mean, I do this for a living, working with people that are in the vulnerable populations, trying to understand, trying to reason, trying to negotiate. The best outcome is a positive outcome, and working with him is the best way to go about it. I don't know how it's going to really end up. And I got co-signers, and I called his mom, who was a co-signer, and she says, my hands are tied. I don't know what to do for him, and I don't have any money to give you. And so what's interesting about this is when you talk about rent, if I don't get rent from him, my mortgage is still due. We don't own that property right out. I still have to pay property taxes on it, which are about $6,500 a year. So the half of rent will pay the property taxes. I'll have to find money for the mortgage. But if I don't get paid and he's there until January, my experience is this is what happens with landlords. They increase the rent next year to make up for the loss this year. And I've talked to other landlords that are right now have open places. They're deciding not to rent. They're keeping their places empty because they don't want someone to move in and then take advantage of this program and then them not get paid and have to go through the eviction process. And so it's an interesting situation. I'm going to continue to work with him, try to text him, be as nice as I can be and try to help him. But my hands are tied. I don't have any options other than to continue to try to negotiate with him. But my other tenants, one person said, I'm going to be late with the rent. I said, not a problem. Let me know when you have it. He was 3 days late. And other than that, we haven't had a problem. But I will tell you, I haven't raised the rent on anybody in 3 years. And they're aware of that. So as their income goes up, whether it's $1 an hour or $2 an hour, every year they're making more money. And I continue to work with them and say, like in Essex, you have to pay a water bill. And so I pay the water bill. I say, here's the water bill, guys. I send them a copy of it. I say it went up, $200 this quarter. Please do everything you can to lower that water bill, because if it goes up too high, I have to charge you more. I have to pay the mortgage. And we barely make any money on these investment properties. It's really about retirement. So I think there's a combination of communication between landlords and tenants where we could do a better job, because most tenants think you're rich. They think you're making a lot of money. And so I promote communication, clarity of communication, transparency, honest, open communication. You got to know where the tenant is at. It's a process. It's a developmental process when you work with tenants.
Great.
And some
Thanks
people
so
don't have
much.
skill for it.
Andy, I see your hands up.
Yeah, Deb, you covered a lot of territory here. You mentioned tiny houses. Do you have any feel for what zoning regulations might need to be changed in Essex to allow those?
I don't. It wasn't a topic that really came up while I was on the zoning board. But what was interesting was some of the topics where people were trying to turn their houses into income generating options, like Airbnbs. People that were trying to put a senior apartment onto their houses so that their parents could move in with them. I love that idea. Construction is a good thing. And if it's done right and it's done well, in our house, we feel like at some point when we sell it, we'll be able to sell it to a larger population, because you can either afford it without using the accessory apartment, or you can make less money and get $1,200 from an accessory apartment and help pay. So this house is more marketable and more affordable than a lot of houses in Essex because of that accessory apartment.
Okay, thank you.
And do other board members have questions?
I do. Yeah, I'm fascinated by the concept of tiny houses and how you think that could. So, like, what does that look like? Do you envision like having like special areas of tiny houses that help alleviate pressure off the housing market as a whole, or what is that doing for the community?
Well, it's providing affordable housing. There's very little related expenses when it comes to tiny houses. I mean, my electric bill is $100 and some a month, right? I've got cable. So I have all these what we call related expenses to housing. So beyond the mortgage and the taxes, if somebody can save a couple $100 a month because they don't have those additional expenses, it can either go back to the house, or it goes back to the property tax, or it goes back to living expenses, transportation. So we're always trying to, it's like a P&L, right? It's like you're always trying to manage those little extra dollars. And I love the idea of tiny houses. It's somebody who talked about people are downsizing. That's been my experience. We have 2 kids. They bought both houses. One had to go to New York to get an affordable house. Our son bought a house in Burlington. I mean, you couldn't be any tinier than that house for $260,000. But he's comfortable. He feels like it's enough house. Our daughter went to Crown Point, New York, bought a house in the lake for $170,000. It's a 3,000 square foot house. Beautiful. She's in Crown Point, New York. She feels isolated, but it was affordable housing. So I think that tiny houses, whether it's a community, whether it's allowing a tiny house to be part of a home, we own 20 acres. I can put a tiny house on my land and allow someone to live there, whether it be a relative, a friend, or rent it out. It shouldn't be a problem, but right now I can't. I can't add that house to my land. So I think it's exploring zoning, exploring what would be reasonable options. I love the idea of having a community of tiny houses. I love the idea of using construction to be, you've seen like, well, I look at this stuff all the time, but they take trailers now, big cargo trailers that are dead. They turn them into houses. I mean, there's some beautiful architecture with repurposed houses. And I can picture Resource working with us to develop a repurposed home. And that would be awesome. And people would love that. So I don't think we have to be all traditional.
Yep. Yeah, no, I gotcha. Yeah, you addressed some of the distinctions I was looking for. Like you were talking about, like landowners putting tiny houses on their existing property, and also maybe zoning for a community of tiny houses or like a specific area, kind of the same way we zone for like a townhouse association or condos or some sort of apartment building. Cool.
Well,
thank you.
Nobody likes the idea of a mobile home, but we have a beautiful piece of property and there's a mobile home on it. It's so affordable as a landlord. Mm-hmm. When a window breaks, it's like $40. I mean, we renovate that thing 2 or 3 times over the last 10 years we've owned it because it's so affordable to renovate. And the rent, $900 to be on 2.5 acres of land with no neighbors in a beautiful stainless steel, wood floored home. But it's affordable. The taxes are low because it's a mobile home. So it becomes affordable housing. I don't necessarily like the idea of a mobile home, but I like the idea of creating something like a mobile home out of a repurposed something and making it really cool. But that's affordable living, very affordable living.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. I get a little passionate sometimes.
No, that's perfectly fine. That's great.
Any other board members have questions? Pam, I don't believe there are any other questions, so we really appreciate your time tonight. And we'll let you know within a couple of weeks as to the turnout. So thank you so much
for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And next up, we have Michelle. Michelle,
hello,
I thank you
can
for
you hear
being
me?
so patient.
Sure.
Yes, we can hear you. It's fine.
Great.
I'd like to go ahead and start off with a little bit about yourself and why you're interested.
Okay, well, thanks for having me tonight. I represent the at-large member of the Essex community, and when I saw the call for candidates, I was happy to see that there was not a required qualification for an expertise in housing and social services and real estate, because that's certainly not my background. What I bring is a passion for equity and social justice, and a lot of experience from growing up with that engendered a lot of commitment to doing what's right, being fair. So I recently retired from St. Michael's College. I was in the Office of Admission for 25 years and worked among all the usual duties, working with students and families. I also worked with in the communications side of the house with the marketing department. I worked very, very closely with transfer students. I worked a lot with families and students, not just through the admission process, but also through the financial aid and the daunting affordability proposition. That's certainly not housing, but I worked with families from all different socioeconomic backgrounds. So I had also, because St. Michael's College's mission, central to their mission was the commitment to social justice and community service, and the commitment to empathic and respect for the dignity of all individuals. And I completely embraced that. We lived it. It's become, I appreciated that. It became very natural to me. I grew up in a very civically oriented family. My parents were both very civically oriented. In fact, my mother, who's now 87 years old, in the 90s co-founded Yellow Springs Home Inc. in Ohio, which is a nonprofit land trust affordable housing program, highly successful in a really small village, but they have 22 homes and they're growing with 8 rental properties. And so I really been picking her brain about that. She's been passionate about all her life. And now all of a sudden I find myself looking at an opportunity to give back to my community. So since I retired, I've been looking for an opportunity to do something with my time that's meaningful, that gives something to the community. It would be my first time on a planning board or any kind of board, local government board. I also have had an experience for a number of years working with refugee resettlement program and partnering with a family from Tanzania in helping them acclimate to life in the United States. And the most challenging thing was working with them on trying to find affordable housing. Working with the Burlington Housing Authority. That was totally blind leading the blind, but they also had a language barrier. So that was really gratifying when it worked out, but it was very, very challenging. And you just realize just what an uphill battle that is. So I'm really excited that Essex is deciding to take on this initiative.
Thank you. And let's Patrick, looks like you're up.
Michelle, thank you so much for being here tonight. Could you talk a little bit more about that experience? Specifically, certainly here in Essex, we do have a healthy new American population, those who have come in, individuals that I know personally who, as you mentioned, have had some difficulty with, finding housing. Can you talk about what you've done, or at least your experience in that process with the family from Tanzania? Like what challenges specifically did they face, and what were you able to do to help them overcome them?
Every family's different. Their family, it was very unique because they had multiple generations in their family. It wasn't just a mom and a dad and a kid, or a mother and 3 kids. It was grandparents, young children, adult children, and their children. So it had to find, there were limitations to how many they can put. They were in Winooski for a while, and they had like 10 people in a 2-bedroom apartment. So also the Vermont Refugee Resettlement Program is really underfunded. So they had very, very limited staff that I could go to as to sort of mentor with about where do I go, who do I see? And I finally did connect with somebody with the Burlington Housing Authority who gave me more information, and mostly just helping my family fill out forms because there's lots of paperwork to do. So I think that's another challenge with non-English speaking families. It's not their native language. There's some limited translation opportunities, but they're now settled in Franklin Square up in the north end of Burlington with many, many, many families, new Americans. So that it did work out, but it was a journey.
Great, awesome, thank you.
Other questions from board members? Go ahead, Andy.
Oh, I feel obliged to ask something. Michelle, thanks for talking to us tonight. I hear a lot. I know you've been involved with college admissions for a long time, and I hear from my boys who have all fairly recently graduated from school that there's a lot of anxiety, and with regard to housing trends. That's certainly not the a livable wage and those kind of things, and student loan debt and so forth. Mm-hmm. I guess my question is if you have thoughts about how to, whether there are things that Essex can do to, help address some of those concerns.
Right, and I have to say that I
related to housing. Yeah, sorry.
Yes, housing. Well, that's true. Now I retired from St. Mike's at the end of December, right before this whole COVID thing struck. So I'm in close contact with my friends and colleagues from St. Mike's that it's just enormous challenges. And we're finding, and when I worked with transfer students, this is related to housing, that students that couldn't afford to go to a residential college and pay the high tuitions, encourage students to stay at home and commute and get a couple of years with community college rather than investing in a high-priced, high-tuition residential college where they could save 2 years. So if they're living in a home that they can afford now and go to a commuting school locally and progress their education, maybe for 2 years, they could actually save enough to eventually go to a 4-year program.
Okay, thank you.
Other board members? All right. Well, it appears that we are all set.
Good.
Really
I would like to say just that I understand that my learning curve in this process, I'm humbled by the experience and the expertise of many of the candidates, but I bring a genuine curiosity, a passion for racial, gender, socioeconomic justice across the board. So it's something I would be very passionate about and have the time to put in for learning all that needs to be learned.
Well, Michelle, I really appreciate that. And again, appreciate your time tonight.
Yeah.
If you can give us a few weeks to make a decision, we will absolutely let you know.
All right. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. And that concludes all of the interviews. Again, appreciate all of the candidates who have stepped forward. We certainly do have a nice slew of potential commission members.
I'm very impressed with the quality and number of the applicants. It blows me away.
We live in a great place.
We do.
So it looks like that would bring us on to the next agenda item about the remote learning partnership. I think that's what we're calling it, remote learning for K through 8. And Evan, as this is introduced, I know I had sent to you and Elaine an email basically saying, could you distill what the ask is, given it's already 9 o'clock, and I don't think we necessarily want to get into a lengthy debate around the philosophy of education right now.
Nope. Basically, what we are looking at is how to help the families and our in our community if our school goes to a hybrid system where the kids are in class 2 days and out of class the other 3 days, and then they flip-flop. So we the ask is going to be, is this something you want us to keep continuing to explore? We would be working with the school district on this model, and one of the things the village does is they already run childcare. They know how to do it. They know how to keep kids safe. They've been doing it through the pandemic. The real question at the end will be, if we can do it, can we do it at either, we'd like to do it for free if at all possible, but that is based upon how the cost of educators are covered. And so that's the big ask. And we don't know that yet because we have not had a full discussion with the school district as to what they are able to provide to us if we were to do it. We do have locations scouted out. We have some people interested in providing those spaces. And we just need to know more about what the school is going to do. And if we weren't able to do this every week, could we do it? Should there be a need if there is a particular class or something that goes into, say, they have to, let's just say something happens in third grade in a particular thing. Do they continue school in general and just have those kids segregated out for a period of time, and then what happens? So we are exploring it, and the ask is this something that both the village and the town want us to continue to explore, or questions that you would have of us to get you to that place?
Sounds good. So it sounds like a good place to start. I suppose for anybody who's not willing to have staff continue exploring this, what are the questions you need to have answered in order to make that decision? Patrick?
Just so I'm getting some clarification here, I did read through the notes that you provided, Evan. But I guess I'm maybe not understanding the mechanism. You talked about providing educators. Now, with the hybrid model and what the school is doing, they're talking about sending some kids part days of the week, and the other kids would be home for the remaining 3 days of the week. Are you saying that you would be providing space for parents who have to go to work 5 days a week, where they can send their kids to this program as an alternative?
No.
Or are you talking more about trying to expand out locations so that the school district could send their educators in and basically make like classrooms? I guess
Yeah.
I'm just having some trouble envisioning it.
My term educator is just somebody, it's more a childcare provider. So they're not teachers. We would provide a safe place for kids on their off days to go to, so that they can continue learning what they're supposed to be learning, but their parents could go to work.
Okay, I think that's maybe that missing part that I didn't quite
So-
understand. So it's specifically for the off-day kids.
Yes.
When they're not in the school itself, it would be the
Correct.
alternative for
But-
them.
Right. But for us, so if you think about it, two kids are in Monday and Tuesday. Currently, the school program is everybody's off on Wednesday. And then they flip-flop. So kids are in school at least 2 days a week, but they're off 3. And they're at home somewhere or doing something. We would provide a safe space for those kids during those days, like childcare, like we do after school. And we would do it from roughly 7:30 in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay. Yeah, and I think the mechanism as well is that the children are not going to be necessarily off those days, is that they're remote learning on those days. So we would obviously need to have those spaces, be able to provide, the school district may be able to get Chromebooks, but not necessarily for everyone, and we would need internet connectivity in any location that we provided. The second thing, I don't know if this is probably like the fifth or sixth thing. I'm not sure if you've talked about or discussed any need for security. The school and the school buildings themselves all have auto lock doors. They all have buzzer mechanisms to prevent, obviously, in the worst situations, school shootings or violence or anything along those lines. So if we're setting up an alternative where we're giving a location that students can go to while also attending school, even though it is remote, I'm wondering if we may also need to consider thoughts of security, how those buildings would be set up, because the issues that schools would deal with, sometimes an individual may be a student that is committing the act of violence. In fact, obviously that happens quite a bit. So the schools themselves are set up and designed to have protocols in place for any sort of acts like that, acts of violence. There are methods for evacuation and stuff. I suspect that if we're going to set up some sort of alternative location, that we would probably need to at least come up with something as well, but that's going to need to cover those pretty critical points that the school covers.
I don't disagree. One of the things that we are looking at is when we were meeting with some property owners, our daycare directors had pages of requirements from their departments that they have to adhere to. So we were looking at it. It is possible that we will not be able to meet all of those standards. I would hope we can. But again, the buildings we would be looking to use were not built as schools.
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely a worthy effort. Don't get me wrong. I think that there's just a lot of boxes that need to be checked off.
Again, this is an effort to be into, I guess, an area, a space that is historically done by schools, and we understand why the school district is considering what they're doing. We're looking at it as not as an alternative school, but if that is what happens and kids under, say, the age of 12 or 13, whatever an eighth grader is, K through 8, if they need a safe place and parents aren't able to provide that in their homes, then what happens and where and what's it going to take and how long is it going to be? Is it a month? Is it 6 months? Is it the entire school year? Plus, and selfishly, our own employees would be eligible for this. As you all know, we have employees who live in many different villages, towns, areas, but we still need them on a daily basis to come to work or be at work, especially our police officers. And what happens if their schedules don't line up with their kids' educations? So we're just exploring it. It's an idea. It's daunting, but we are willing and have been willing to look at this and try to be there if possible.
I think Andy had his hand up and then Dan.
Yeah, first, I guess I got to say my wife works for the school district, but that doesn't color what I'm saying here. But having said that, though, I guess the fact that my wife is a teacher, I recognize that the kids aren't kept busy on their days off, aren't going to be kept busy with schoolwork the entire day. And I don't know if that's the expectation, that they'll be sitting at their desks with their computers doing work the entire day, or whether you're going to be having other activities or other I guess it's not it's not going to be a regular school day where they're sitting there at their desk and having subjects change from one to the other. It's kind of free form, right?
No,
So,
I think the idea is that there will be other activities that keep them moving, keep them interested. Again, I'm sure they will have work to be done during those days. Whatever the school is prescribing, that needs to also be done. But yeah, there'd be things like some activities, art, things like that, is what Brad has suggested and envisioned as well.
okay. I guess I didn't clearly get the point that it wasn't expected to be just a replacement for the,
No.
school. Yeah. Okay.
We
Thanks.
cannot replace school.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
We
Okay.
we are looking for a place, and we have some places that make sure they have Wi-Fi, to make sure that a couple, 100, or more children who might be on, all at the same time.
Right.
It's a daunting task to even consider how to do this, to try to be there for our working families that may not have a choice.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Dan, you're next.
I support the idea, and I can imagine it's quite a daunting task for you and Brad and Ally and others working on this. Couple concerns. Patrick brought up one. You said you'd like this to be free, and I'm just wondering, obviously there's going to be some expenses here and what the funding mechanism for costs associated with this. The other is liability issues. I get concerned when get that many people together doing something. Is this going to be, sanctioned or seen by, I assume, the town itself? That encompasses the village as well. And I guess that's it for now, right? Those are the main ones, but the health of the kids and everything, just a lot of things. I know that's, no matter where they are, you got to be concerned about it. If there's going to be like a nurse on staff or somebody right there or what have you, it's, I don't know where, it'd be schools like where a lot of things have happened. My daughter, other, people's children have that school programs. The village used to do it right at the schools, and then there's other programs over at Maple Street, but they're set up to deal with that. Just wanted to be curious.
I will have to look into what the nursing. I don't believe we have that in our after school programs, but I will have to ask about that. And one of the things that we are going through is the guidelines for daycare. Again, we are not an educational facility. We have to meet the daycare guidelines by the state of Vermont. Maureen and Alyssa are our two directors that work in that. And so some of the questions of the school district are some of those same questions. So we will continue. And as for liability, I will have to check with VLCT, but I believe as long as we follow the guidelines as a daycare center, which we are licensed to be, we'd probably be in a decent status.
The only thing with my concern is that it's not necessarily going to be a town or municipal property. What my understanding or my view is, you're looking to private locations, private property, or whatever, commercial property.
Agreed. And we would only do this if we could maintain our spaces and cleanliness. We've talked about how we fog our current buildings in our schedules so that we have. I'm currently in the town hall. Our town hall gets fogged regularly. We do wipe down the surfaces. Again, that's on our list of whether we can control those spaces prior to enter, and then we would leave it in a state for them to use, and then we would come back in.
Well, the liability issue, I'm more concerned of injuries on the property, be it from a trip, a fall, accidental, something breaks or something. I mean, those type of things, whereas municipality were, covered. But when we're moving off premise to a, remote location, I'm just curious.
Yeah. Okay.
Do other board members have other questions? I know for me, one of your questions about cost. One of my concerns is having it be free for everybody, when frankly we know that there's a fair amount of individuals who need it in order to get back to work and don't make enough to be able to afford it. I would certainly support some kind of sliding scale, some kind of scholarship program. I know EJRP has used scholarships in the past. Reinstating something like that, I would certainly be in favor of.
Okay. We have discussed that briefly. Yes, they do have scholarships, and they have a program already in daycare that might be able to, sorry for the same term, slide right in. Probably better to do that than try to create something out of thin air.
Go ahead, Elaine.
Evan, just to confirm, you said you haven't heard back yet from EWSD about whether they can contribute to the cost of this program. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And which is fine. And whenever you hear from that, I'm sure you'll inform us. And then if there's any state funding that can be provided for whatever programs, whatever COVID-related programming that towns have to do. I know the Agency of Administration is going to be administering a municipal grant program for COVID-related expenses, and there's probably other opportunities. AHS has a daycare grant available as well, so I'm assuming you're looking into those things. I don't know that there's anything federal coming down at the moment. The other thing I just want to say is I want to commend you and your staff for coming up with a really brilliant program and a service that our residents are going to need badly, and helping out our employees with their children and with our residents who don't have remote options when they're supposed to be at work or might have difficulty with internet. This is a really great idea, and I really appreciate that you came up with it. And please thank your staff. And for myself, I'd like to do anything I can to make it happen.
I certainly appreciate that. I have concerns. I'm not going into this saying, oh, this is going to be, we have concerns. We have, and I'll commend the school district. They have, and Pat, help me out, 2,400 students. Sound about right?
That's ballpark.
K through 12th grade, right? And all different, needs, areas, etc. And we're just trying to figure out how we can be there for our community and use what we know how to do, which is childcare. We serve over 400 kids a day in childcare in varying ways, and then athletics, etc. Now, we're trying something, and we're trying not to be overwhelmed by some of the obstacles. I can tell you one thing that we will not do. We will not be a transportation agency. This is going to have to be parents dropping their kids off and picking them up. We don't do school busing like the schools do. So we're just learning. I am encouraged by some of the feedback from Maureen and Alyssa. Brad is always Mr. Optimist, so that's not a problem. Allie has got some good ideas as well. But one of the problems we have is we don't have what the school district has, which is 1 million square feet. we can only cobble together some spaces. What we do have is a couple of local business owners who are willing to work with us for the next year or so with this idea, because they are community oriented and they see the need. I will tell you that one of our largest properties that we're currently discussing is the movie theater. He has 10 movie theaters. He has individualized seats. If we do a group of 15 kids, we can space them well out. All of his spaces have Wi-Fi. We can work on security. He is going to allow us to have his front parking lot during the day, so that if the kid, we can use some of the grassy areas as well. It's not perfect, but it could work. And so all he wants to do is make sure some of his costs are covered. But other than that, he doesn't have any movies to show and even then he said, I would normally do a noon show, but if I move my first show back to 3:30, okay. And so that's one of the places we're looking at. I have a meeting tomorrow with the Millers, who built Blodgett and all those other spaces. I have a meeting with them tomorrow to discuss some options and some availabilities, and we'll just take it from there. And I will, as soon as I know more from the school district, I will know what the ask is really going to be.
Great.
Vince, you have your hand up, but you're muted. You're muted.
Vince, your mouth is moving, but we're not hearing you.
Sorry. Weren't there some like smaller schools that were like consolidated years ago? I think in the village maybe. Are those buildings still there, and are they still worthy of? No.
There's no school buildings that I'm aware of. Park Street School is a village property, and it has daycare in it already.
Okay.
And the ACE program from the high school is already in there.
Gotcha. Yeah, the only other thing is I can't get behind the movie theater because I love matinees, and that would just wreck the matinees.
3:00. Is that too late for you?
It is.
3.
Well, I wouldn't get my $1.50 off a movie. Come on, man.
Well, Vince,
Just
it's
kidding.
for the kids.
I know.
I know. It's late.
So I got cut off at one point, and so Elaine, Dan, I don't know which one of you had your hands up first. I think you said Dan, so Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, I just a couple ideas. Back when I was in high school a couple years ago, in Montpelier, the high school there, when it was outgrowing the student population was outgrowing the school itself, prior to Union 32 being built, we had mobile units attached to the school. I'm just curious if that's something, like you see at job sites and such, if we could possibly, then, just thinking outside the box, I know Pam, who was interviewed for the Housing Commission, brought up something about tiny houses and repurposing, trailers and such. Well, mobile units could house quite a few people. And another thing maybe to look at would be, I know my daughter did this when she was in high school, or maybe even, junior high, but mentoring a student, like one-on-one. The students aren't, always needing a instructor, but taking the older kids, maybe one-on-one with a mentoring a younger child or something like that. Whatever we could do with that, I don't know.
And I'll be, the other thing is, if the state, their current distancing guidelines is 6 feet, if they lower that to less than 6, the school district will be able to do a little bit better with their space, and they will lower the need outside of school. So we're ready to play off of what the school district's plans are. That's why our relationship with them is so very important. The next thing is, we use their properties every day, after school and at night. We need those schools to be open. So if they close, our recreation, our abilities to do after school care gets affected as well. So we have a very good relationship with the school district. We want them to succeed. We need them to be open. We need them and the kids and the teachers and all their employees to be safe and not come down with COVID. And so it's really it's more of an integrated system than I ever really imagined. And the more I work on it with Brad and Allie and Alyssa and Maureen, I am more and more convinced that we need to keep some options open for our kids and our families.
Elaine, your hand up? No? All right. Vince?
Sorry, I have one last suggestion / crazy idea. What do you think about the hockey rink? Does that have ice on it right now? Are people skating? Is that maybe like a place we could drain it and put desks and stuff?
It is not of ice. It is on our list. It is an idea. The problem we run into, which we would overcome with other spaces, is if available from the school, we would probably look to use it early in the season until September, October. The problem is you cannot heat it without the ice on it. And I can't really go into it, but the building is made that to be heated, you have to have ice on the floor. And so we would potentially be able to use it early in the school year, like through September, maybe October, but then it will be too cold. Inside.
The ice rink is also not air conditioned, which is a significant problem in September, sometimes into October, especially these most recent years. It would be effectively impossible, I think, to teach any classes because it can get up to 90, 95 degrees in there.
We have Bruce working on that. Just he started laughing. It would have to be well into late September, early October, and only it's a thought, but it's likely that depending upon what the school district does, we will do more things at either the movie theaters. Also, we have talked with Chips about using their space upstairs at 2 Lincoln. And we have 1 or 2 other possibilities right now, but we've got 3 weeks or 4 weeks to get our act together. And that's just assuming we try to start when school starts.
Are there any other questions?
I appreciate your support. We'll keep at it and keep you posted.
We appreciate you all doing this.
Thanks.
Going on to consolidation MOUs.
Greg, do you want to handle this one? You want me to do it?
I can introduce it and jump in when you want. This was a conversation we had sort of briefly started to have at the last meeting and decided to postpone it for timing reasons. But just starting the conversation or continuing the conversation around where we're going with merger and consolidation, and not knowing what's going to happen with a November ballot at this point, waiting for a decision there, but recognizing it's looking not likely to have a merger on the ballot for November, merger vote. Wanted to start to take a look at what else we need to do as organizations to keep doing what we're doing, lock in some of the practices that we have. We have several MOUs in place now, probably worth revisiting some of those and seeing what needs to be extended, seeing what we can continue that we already have in place and support that. The Public Works Memorandum of Agreement jumps to mind there. And also seeing where we may need to do some new areas, such as different functions of the manager's office, the IT department, HR, other staff. So kind of just looking to start the discussion tonight and see if the boards have anything else they'd like us to consider that we can bring back with some more detail at some point.
Thank you. Patrick, your hand's up.
Yeah, I'd like staff to, because I didn't see in the list, and I know that we've had some questions about it in the recent few weeks, something related to the police department and exactly, what, if any, MOUs there are or were between the trustees and the select board. I think it's given, as it is right now, that the select board has jurisdiction, as it were, over the running of the police department, but since we were unable to find any documentation to that specific effect, I'm wondering if it might not be a bad idea for us to have something official that we'll be able to fall back on if we need it.
Okay.
In looking at the public works of understanding that we have, and then the report of the Public Works Review Committee, which was put out how many years ago? In 2017, the final report, and there were recommendations made by the committee at that time. And there were recommendations to study and implement a single rolling stock fund, establish common purchasing policy, which we've done, study and establish a single consolidated capital project planning, funding, and implementation process, and establish guidelines for assuming future debt for equipment and projects and for joint bonding. So, there's still some heavy lifting to be done. And the Public Works consolidation was, I would say, one of the most successful things we've done so far. And it's not done yet. So I'm not sure if we need to extend the MOU for that purpose or to maintain it as an MOU until we complete that work. But especially since merger is most likely not going to be on the ballot in November, capital needs to be addressed, and the Public Works process should be completed. We've got a report that's 3 years old telling us to do that, and we've only done the one thing on it, which is the purchasing policy. So I would like to see us move forward on that.
I would also say something that would be helpful is of the MOUs, if they have end dates that are coming up, or if they're just perpetually renewing, being able to know that so that we can honestly fix them. I'd love to see them either be self-renewed or get us to some other mechanism where we don't all of a sudden find ourselves with our hands up if we're 2 months away from a deadline.
I wonder if it would be helpful, Evan and Greg, if we came back to this conversation with a little bit more direction in terms of, you gave us a link to all of the consolidation documents that are on the town website, and there's many, and several of them are expired, but they're all expired versions of existing agreements. And I wonder if we could perhaps, just because of the workload and because of what the materials we have to deal with, can we get a list of the specific MOUs that are in effect now, when they were signed into the agreements and when they expire, so that we can just go through the list and decide as a group what we should do with each one. It doesn't seem like we have enough we have more than enough information as opposed to narrowing it down. And I think narrowing it down would be helpful for both boards.
Okay.
When I look at the website, I see 6 different MOUs that we should be dealing with. But there's like 15 on there. So I think that would be helpful for all the board members to just have the specific ones in front of us, and that's what we discuss, just to put a fence around that pasture.
Does anybody have anything else? That sounds great.
Great.
And we're ready to move on to the future meeting schedule.
Greg, you wanna I'll start. So each of you meets twice a month. The question is, how often do you want to meet as a joint board? And as evidenced by not really ever starting on time for the joint board meeting, no offense to the chairs, it's just you don't control who shows up and what the public says, or we've tried it, we keep trying it. There's a lot of work. The question really, and maybe not even for just tonight, but maybe think about how often you want to work, how often you want to meet as a joint board, and the issues that the joint boards should address versus the individual boards. I know it's late, just something to think about. What do you think works? And during those meetings, what are the business items that you guys will be working, joint decision wise? So that staff has a sort of a good roadmap of what's supposed to go where and when.
Well, Evan, if I may, I think we have a list of things to do that we generated at our last meeting regarding answering questions and solving problems around the merger agreement we are negotiating. And so we have 6 or 7 items that we agreed were important, and I think those could serve as the basis for future joint meetings.
I would also say it's become pretty clear that there's no way we're going to make that November or the August 24th deadline in order for the merger vote to happen. And so if we go to one joint meeting a month and we're focused, I think that can work, as we don't necessarily have an impending deadline that we're trying to meet.
Mm-hmm. And I noticed that on the proposed schedule, first Tuesday, first Wednesday, and the rest are all Tuesdays. While I understand that the Tuesday meeting day gives an extra day for staff to answer questions and track down requests that board members make, the select board's current practice is Mondays, or current practice before everything got upended. And I know that Tuesdays are very difficult for some of our members. I'm just wondering if the select board dates could go back to Mondays. I realize that's not as convenient as it could be.
We could absolutely keep it on Mondays. Just wanted to put something in front of the boards to take a look at and pick apart. So we can, easily do that if that's the desire of the boards. And then I guess the next question would be, when do you want to meet jointly?
Andy?
You covered some of what I wanted to say. I mean, we've changed our meeting schedule a couple of times already this year, and it's extremely disruptive to my work life. So I can go to Tuesday as long as we say we're going to do it 4 months from now or 3 months from now, not immediately, if that's what's necessary. But to make these rapid changes of schedule every couple of weeks is pretty painful for me. And if it's one Wednesday a month, I can do that. If it's 2 Wednesdays a month, I can't. Or it's more difficult, I guess I should say. So I don't know. It's just I agree with staying on Monday for select board meetings for now. Maybe, as I said, in a couple of months, if with a couple of months warning, I can work it out to change the date.
So Andy, are you saying that it's that the Tuesday, Wednesday combination that's proposed in the memo is okay, or you would prefer that we go back to Mondays?
I prefer going back to Mondays, but if there's if others would prefer Tuesday, as long as we give me 3 or 4 months warning that we're going to change to Tuesday, so that I can rearrange all of my work schedule. That's if the proposal is to go to Tuesdays starting next month or next week, it would be very painful for me. I would likely miss several meetings.
I see. Greg, I'm assuming that this meeting change was intended to take effect maybe next month, if not sooner.
Oh, again, there's no time frame on it. I'm just trying to get the memo in front of me, but again, it's flexible. It's what the boards want. Trying to recognize the hassle that creates for all of you to have the back-to-back meetings and move away from that, and also trying to figure out what staff can manage. So we are open. Just wanted to put something out, and we can, like I said, we can easily stick with Mondays. I think the question is, what do we do with the joint meetings?
Right. Okay. Pat?
I agree with Andy. The Mondays are much better, and I would also make a point of saying that the first and third Tuesdays of each month are also Essex Westford School Board meeting days, which, given the state of affairs, is something that I try to turn into. I don't think it's necessarily a good idea for us to schedule select board meeting to be on the same date and time as the school board. The Wednesday, I hate to be the sticky wicket, but that would be, it is a work day for me that's inflexible. I can typically attend meetings at work, but it is very random. As I think most people know, my job is reactive. So if there's an issue or something that needs to be tended to, that can happen at the drop of a hat, and I could be in the middle of a meeting and need to leave because I would have to address a work issue.
Well, Pat, we wouldn't want to schedule a standing meeting to occur always during your workday.
That's what I figured, but again, I'm trying to be flexible for what people it can do. Like the occasional Wednesday is not typically a problem, but if it was a solid thing, it runs the risk that at some point I will, I'm sure, be in the middle of a meeting and say I have to go. It's just it will happen.
Andrew, I'm assuming the trustees are okay with the Tuesday schedule, because that's the usual Tuesday schedule for trustees?
That it aligns well with what we've normally done. Dan, Amber, if you feel otherwise, please chime in.
All I'll say is that Tuesday's fine, Mondays are fine. It's not so much the day that's the issue, it's the time that's the issue, and that's the time I think is the issue at hand for much of us, because as we're all aware, these meetings run late. It's what, 10:05 now? Your meeting started at 7:15, or this meeting started at 7:15. It was supposed to start at 7:15, started at 8:45, or whatever it was, 8:45. Anyhow, the earlier we can start the meetings, the better, as far as I'm concerned. That's all I would need to say.
So the sticking point appears to be the Wednesday. Greg?
Just throwing it out there, the second Monday or the third Monday or the No, not the third Monday. Second Monday or fourth Monday for a joint meeting. I mean, it's back to back for the trustees, but gets you out of the Wednesdays and keeps to a Monday, Tuesday schedule.
That would work.
I can do that.
That would work for me too, yeah.
I think that sounds fine. And I think if the 6:30 start time were to happen, that'd be even better.
Great. So
Yeah,
then
I guess-
basically the only change to the recommendation would be, the two changes would be the select board would go back to first and third Monday. And then the joint meeting would be second Monday? Fourth Monday. Okay. Evan?
Andy was just about to say something, so.
No, I was just going to say 6:30 works for me on any Monday, so we can.
Right.
Tuesday would be much harder to do 6:30, but Monday's fine.
So if joint meetings are on Monday, then we start at 6:30. Whatever the meeting is before it. The select board would start at 6:30.
Okay.
Oh, this came up, this just popped into my head. Sorry. Hey Greg, what would happen if joint board was first?
Well, we do.
We're not talking about having them the same night.
Yeah, so the joint meeting would be on a separate night, it'd be a fifth night.
Okay. Okay. All right, so we're select board stays Monday on Mondays, village board on Tuesdays. Okay.
And joint meeting is on one of the off Mondays.
Okay. But
Monday select board, second Tuesday trustees, third Monday select board, fourth Monday joint meeting, fourth Tuesday trustees. Is that
That sounds
accurate?
good.
And we could adjust whether it's on the 4th depending on whether there's a holiday, right?
Right.
Well, of course.
I was gonna say, there's some months where you don't get a fourth Monday.
Great. And all meetings are starting at 6:30?
Yes.
You're here.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all. We've gone around this so many times. I appreciate your patience.
Do you need a motion for this?
What's that?
Do we need to do motions for this?
Wouldn't hurt.
Would anyone from the select board like to move to approve that new schedule of meetings?
Move to adopt the new meeting schedule as proposed by staff.
And is
With
there a
amendments?
second?
With amendments.
Make a second, Vince, and then we can talk about that.
All right, I will second that.
Okay. How would you like, do you need to
Yeah.
amend that?
Yeah, well, just that Pat said as proposed by staff, so I didn't want it to be confused with the proposal that we have in front of us, but the proposal that we have with the amendments that we made. It's kind of pedantic,
Understood.
but I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
I will accept that friendly amendment.
All those in favor on the select board, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous.
All right, trustees.
I'll move that the trustees adopt the new meeting schedule as presented with the amendments.
Second.
Any further discussion? The only thing I want to clarify is if we could start this in September or later, then that would be appreciated.
I'm fine.
So there's the motion has been seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Passed unanimously. Thank you. And we are now on to the reading file and board member comments. Trustees, is there anything you'd like to say tonight? All right, I think we're good.
I
Looks
just
like
have one
Vince
thing.
has a comment.
I wasn't here to make the last joint meeting, so I just wanted to apologize in person to the trustees about the debacle we had a few weeks ago around us not, including you in the discussion with the police. I just personally wanted to take the time and apologize in public to you folks. And I know that not all the trustees are here, but this is to the trustees as a board.
Thank you, Vince. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Vince.
Anything else, Select Board?
If you don't mind, I have one quick thing. Our survey on racial justice is out. We have nearly 500 responses to date. It will be out there for just about another month. We're going to, we need a cutoff day. So we're picking, I believe it's September 3rd, so that we get the Labor Day weekend to do some reviews of that. By the way, we have the ability to translate, I believe, 10 different languages. So the 10 most popular languages in and around Chittenden County, other than English. So working at it.
That's great.
All right. I think that's everything, Andrew.
Great, and since we don't have a quorum of the trustees to make a decision on the Housing Commission, I think we are ready to adjourn.
So we will have another executive session planned for our next joint meeting to discuss these applicants. Is that the plan, Evan?
Yes.
Okay.
And should we be clear when that next joint meeting is? Is it what would have been the second joint meeting in August on a Tuesday night? For Andrew's suggestion that we not start the new schedule till September?
We were supposed to meet on the 25th.
That would be my understanding.
Okay.
So if there's nothing else, if someone wants to make a motion to adjourn.
Move.
Second.
Dan made a motion to adjourn, Amber seconded. Any further discussion from the trustees? Hearing none of those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, trustees. Good night.
I make the motion the select board adjourns.
Thank you, Don. Is there a second?
I will second that motion.
Vince, thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Evan. Have a good evening.
Good night, everybody.
All right.
Good night.
Good night.